I'd like to call the meeting to order. And bear with me, this is my first time sitting here in the center with the gavel, so I will try to wield the power correctly and say the right words. So, welcome to the regular meeting of the Design Review Committee on Thursday, April 20th, 2023. I call the meeting to order at 5:03. Madam City Clerk, will you please take the call? Roll call.
Member Dryden Hess.
Present.
Member Martin.
Présente.
Member Lapp.
Here.
Vice Chair Jacobson Bates.
Here.
Chair Kavanaugh, absent.
I'd now like to ask, let's ask Jennifer if you would please lead the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we'll now move on to the consent agenda. Are there any committee members that would like to have anything pulled from the consent agenda?
Vice Chair, if I
Yes.
may, we need to first approve the order of the agenda as presented.
Thank you for the reminder. So I'd like to start by asking for a motion to approve the order of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Yes.
Second.
We'll now move to consent. Madam City Clerk? Do we take a vote on that?
Yeah, we need to take a vote on the motion for the or agenda as presented. We had a motion first and a second. So now
Do we
we
need to have any public comment on that?
no.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, so we just need to actually take the vote on the motion.
I'd like to call for a vote, please.
Typically, this body does an all for or nay.
Okay, we will do that today. If all in favor, please indicate by saying approved.
Approved.
Aye.
Aye.
Approve. Aye.
And that is absent Member Kavanaugh.
Motion passes for,
4-1. Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so just to clarify, this evening, you'd like to do the yay or nay, not do the call for the vote, and you take a roll. Am I clear on that?
The tradition of this body before I even began was just all in favor, any opposed.
Okay, we will do that. Thank you.
Thanks for muddling through our scripted
Yeah.
agenda, Esther.
This is a new way of doing it and a new person doing it. So then we'll move on to the consent agenda now. Do any members, committee members, have items that they would like to have pulled from the consent agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent items.
We are broadcasting. Yes, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, we'll get the TV on here. See if we've got anybody in Zoom that would like to be participating. Yeah, it's not on. Maybe you proceed with the consent items in the interim? Okay, so committee, any items you'd like to pull? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent items.
We do need to have public comment on the consent items.
Okay,
So, yeah, you can
then
open.
we do need to wait till we're on Zoom then.
The Zoom is still live?
Yeah, they can hear. It was just,
Okay, we just didn't know.
we just couldn't see the feed, yeah.
All right. Is there any member of the public that's present that would like to comment on or pull any of the items on the consent agenda? Anybody in Zoom? I don't see anybody present in Zoom this time. Am I correct in understanding that, staff?
There are 3 people present, but nobody has their hands up.
Okay, thank you. All right, then we'll go back to, do any committee members have any items they would like to pull? All right, then let's have a motion to approve the consent items, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a moved and a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, then let's call for a vote. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
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 Aye. That passes 4-0 with Chair Kavanaugh absent. We'll go on to public communications. The committee welcomes your input, and at this time, you may address the committee on items not on the agenda and on consent. Time limit is 3 minutes. We'll start with the in-person. Is there anybody in the room that would like to address items not on the agenda today? Okay, then we'll move on to Zoom. Anybody on Zoom that would like to discuss items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move forward. We're going to go to item 4A, discussion and possible action to approve the proposed menu sign, including a requested modification for the size and a proposed chalkboard sign at Chomp Burgers, Fries, Shakes at 1693 Mission Drive. Staff report, please.
Hi.
Okay.
Good.
Before you do
One
that,
moment.
go ahead.
Since I live 500 feet within that particular building, I have to recuse myself, which I will do right now.
Yes, and then if you could just exit the room, and we'll call you back in when we're done with the item. Thank you.
Okay. Member lap departing. Staff report, please.
Okay. So I want to first say Lisa took the first stab at this one in the C&E one. I think she did a great job. So, okay. So for Chomp Burgers, Fries, and Shakes, they're requesting approval for 2 signs. The first being a proposed menu sign. They're requesting a modification because the size is slightly larger than what is allowed in the code. As we included, I think it's like 0.15 square feet larger than what would be required in the code. Menu display cases are allowed for primary food and beverage businesses, and they're required to be behind glass or plastic. So, as I mentioned, everything fits the requirements of the code except for the size, which is why they're requesting a modification. The other sign they're asking for approval for is a chalkboard sign. The applicant is proposing to affix the sign to the building by the front door, fronting Mission Drive. So if you all went by, I walked by today, they have a pole right in front of one of their planters, and they have the menus. Oh, sorry, this is a chalkboard sign. Sorry, it's right next to the front door. According to the code, we're just approving like the frame and the color of the chalkboard. We're not approving the copy, so that means the copy can change. And as I mentioned, all pieces of it for both signs adhere to the regulations outlined in the code, except for the modification for the sign for the menu sign. And the applicant is here if you have any questions.
I had one clarifying question of applicant. I believe that my understanding from the material is that the,
Jennifer, I think that we want to ask staff first, and then we'll invite applicant up. So if I understand correctly, are there any questions of staff?
Nope.
Okay, so seeing no questions of staff, we'd like to open it to public comment. And at this time, it would be nice to have the applicant step up. We already know there might be a question. Jennifer.
thanks. I inferred from the materials that the reason.
On?
Yeah, it is on, but,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Okay. Oh, there, that works. I inferred from the materials that the reason why the change in size was because the menu box itself is slightly larger, and it looks like you're buying a prefabbed box, and so that to me makes complete sense. Was there any option to get that box size smaller so it was conforming?
I assume I'm on? Nope. Should be. Hello, hello? Okay. It's a waterproof metal box, and so it has a frame that's larger than the size, but the actual glass is less than the size that's allowed. And we have our menu fixed inside it. I tried to go smaller. It got much more smaller. So the actual square footage of the sign, I think, is, I can't remember, I should have brought my schematics, but it's like 1.5 inches too wide and 1 inch too high, but the actual frame that you see, the glass, is less. And it's a waterproof, lockable
Right.
lift box. It's a really great menu box.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
So I can add to that. So the overall width, height, and depth is 18.5 inches by 24.5 inches, with the depth being 2. And then the viewable width and height is 13 by 19.
Okay.
So the viewable is
Right.
under, the square is like
Yeah.
1/2 inch too big and 1/2 inch too big, but it's a good waterproof box. I've had a few, you may have more of these, because I've had a lot of people come by and say, wow, that's a great menu box. And I said, it is, because it's as big as you can get from your view, but it's a little bit too big, 1/2 inch one side, 1/2 inch the other side.
Okay. So I am inclined to be fine with it. I just want to make sure that if we approve it, that we approve it with the understanding that the only reason why we're doing it as an exception is because it's so close. It's not an exception that could be necessarily, in my view, a way to get an exception to every other sign request.
And Member Hess, these are great comments. I would just ask that you expand on them after the end of the public
Okay.
hearing. We want to give opportunity for the rest of
Yep.
the public to comment as well before
Absolutely.
deliberation. Thank you.
Any other comments from you, Aaron?
Nothing. The only comment is your code enforcement person is spot on, and she has gone around to different places, and hopefully others will comply. We had a menu sign that was not in compliance. It was COVID kind of induced. We had a chalkboard that was skinny but long, not COVID induced. So I'm hoping that we continue on this enforcement. Because there's a big need. So I got hit on Friday, Monday, came in, paid my $300, and I'm here. I'm a compliant guru. It's just the online, all I could find was this one that had the rubber gaskets and lockable and everything else. So it's just a little bit big. So that's all I'm asking for. And I put it up so you could actually see pictures, drive by, walk by, and see what it looked like. If you want it down, we'll change it. But whatever y'all want.
Thank you. Public comments from the room? Seeing none, we'll move on to Zoom. Anybody on Zoom, please raise your hand. Okay, then HIP committee, other comments up here?
No problem with that.
I have one question. And this is again for you, Aaron, so I don't know if you'd like to come back up to the microphone. I understand the reason for the slight bit over as a standard size, and I did go by and take a look. My question was, does it come in black too? That was the only concern I had.
Comes in silver only, and if you said spray it black,
It could be painted.
I'll spray it black. It doesn't matter to me. It's metal. My kids thought, well, the silver looked okay and it was fine. But if you want it sprayed black, it will take me 5 minutes to spray it black, truly.
My question was about the color because it's on a black pole, and with the chalkboard, you kind of have the opposite. The wood trim is kind of the color of the cork board, and then the chalkboard is black, so you kind of have the chalkboard is black with a wood trim, and this would be the opposite. It was black.
Tell
Committee
me to spray
members?
it black, I don't care. Honestly, I just didn't want to do it without, because I might have gotten, wow, it's black, and that stands out too much. So I left it standard, but it can easily be just sprayed black.
Colleagues on the committee here, comments?
Black would be better.
Absolutely fine.
if you paint it, then I would request it be like electrostatic then or something.
It'll
so-
be a matte. It'll be a
Yeah,
matte.
so it doesn't
black.
peel, and then you're going to have
Yeah.
the maintenance issues.
No, no, no.
So it's
We'd
always.
sand it and do it right.
Yeah.
And kind of have a,
It's a 10-minute job,
Okay.
truly.
Okay. Yeah.
do I have a motion? Then, any other discussion in regards to I believe that they are together, the two signs here? Let me just double check that. Can we combine this into a single motion here for the two signs?
Yes.
Okay, so.
You
I'll-
can read the subject. So we're intending for the subjects to be the motion unless it changes during the meeting.
All right. And the subject of this is,
Yeah. So
act-
I can help if you want.
thank you,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah. So, Vice Chair, it would be something to the effect of a motion to approve a menu sign, including and requesting modification for the size and proposed chalkboard sign at Chomp Burgers, Fries and Shakes at 1693 Mission Drive, with the additional change to paint the sign, the frame of the sign black.
Okay,
So-
rather than just calling for a vote on 4A, you would like me to repeat the entire motion or the
Yes.
entire subject. So all that said, would you like me to repeat that, or can we go ahead and move with what you've said? And do I have a motion?
So moved with the modification to the sign box to be painted black.
A second?
Yes, second.
I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor indicate with an aye.
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 Aye. So that's, motion passes with 3 ayes, 1 abstention, and 1 absence.
They're
Okay.
both considered absent.
Pardon me?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think then we are ready to move on. Thank you. Returning to the room. Thank you for being present for the discussion. And compliments on the sign at Mortenson's Bakery that our committee approved some time ago. Yeah, very nice.
Great job.
Yeah, compliments on that. Okay, welcome back to the dais here. And then we'll go on to item 4B, discussion and possible action to approve the proposed hanging or under canopy arcade sign, 3 wall signs, and awning sign and exterior paint for C&E Jewelry at 476 First Street. Sophia, can we have a staff report, please?
Yes, ma'am. So we're really excited about this one because they're going to be taking over the vacant site where Carnaventus Winery used to be between the Winston and the Solvang shoe store. That's been vacant in the 2 years I've been here. So, but they're proposing, I think, 5 signs and then painting the exterior. So I'll just walk through it. So the first sign is a hanging or under canopy arcade sign that they want to hang at the north side of the building under, so they're going to have a valance, they like to have a valance and then have this hang underneath it. So the concern that we have is that there wouldn't be a 7-foot clearance from the sidewalk. However, the area right there is a little patio with, it's not intended for people to be walking through like under a sidewalk or like on a sidewalk or anything like that. So, and there's a photo in here that you'll be able to see. The sign does meet the requirements in the code. It's actually their existing sign the projecting sign that they have at their current location that y'all approved several months ago. And it does meet the overall maximum square footage for the property. Since there's going to be no signs, everything is within what is allowed. Let's see. And they're only proposing 1, which is within the bounds of the code. For signs 2 and 3, they're proposing 2 wall signs, one to go on the north side of the building, the other to go on the south side of the building. And the wall signs are wood carved with inlay letters and flowers, and they're white and black. They meet the requirements in the code in terms of size, overall size, and the height of the letters. And again, it's included in the maximum square footage for allowable signs on that building. And they're allowed to have one wall sign per building frontage, which is the case in this instance. And then for sign 4, they're proposing an awning. So there's an existing awning that they'll be replacing with, it'll be a black awning. It's Sunbrella Fire Assist Black. And they want to have white lettering that meets the requirements of the code. So 5 inches on the front that says C&E Jewelry. And then on the, then they're going to have like descriptive words on either side. And those are required by the code, I believe, to be, sorry, I just missed my spot. And those letterings for the descriptive words are required to be 3 inches in height. So the jewelry and the gifts would meet those requirements. We did not obtain the pitch, so I don't quite know if it meets those requirements for the 4 and 12 pitch. And then sign 5 is the wall sign. So they're proposing a wall sign attached to the front of the building. So the facade, the front facade facing First Street. And it's going to be just the letters themselves that'll be dimensional. So it's not like a sign that has C&E Jewelry on it. It's like what you approved for Coast Range a couple months ago, where it's like the individual letters. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Okay. And so they're proposing, they'll design that within the confines of the code. So it can't be like the dimensions around those letters can't be larger than 7 square feet, and the letter height won't be larger than 8 inches. And that's also included in the overall maximum square footage. Let's see. And then for the exterior paint, they're proposing to utilize Hunt Club, which is the green color that you all have for the exterior walls, and then alabaster for the trim. And they're wanting to use iron ore again for the railing and the gutters. We did indicate to them that they have to obviously bring the colors to you all, but you may ask for warmer or lighter colors, and we'll explore that when we come to the meeting. And that is it. We're recommending approval.
Okay, any questions, committee of staff?
Question about the trim, is that, are those the up and down bars on that? Is that considered to be the trim? And
The half timbering,
the
yes.
half timbering would be
Yes.
the trim in light, and then the green would be the actual plaster or wall part of that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, I had that question too. Any other
I
questions?
have a question about the sign. Would it be rectangle with sharp angle like that or oval?
I think it's intended to be rectangle. The applicants are here, so when it comes to public comment, you can also ask that of them.
Okay.
The way it's on the attachment is it's rectangular, so we had assumed it was rectangular.
Any other questions from staff? Okay, we'll open it to public comment. Applicants, I understand, are in the room. Would you like to come forward and tell us about it and be available for questions? If you could start by introducing yourselves.
Hi, I'm Elise.
I'm Sierra.
So to answer the question, we did want to move those to an oval. It was just hard to display it since they're white signs with a black trim around the edges.
On the sign?
Yes,
Okay. The angle could be,
correct.
okay.
The existing signage that was there was an oval, so we would be mimicking that oval shape.
Perfect.
Yes,
Okay.
So this type of sign would be an oval sign as opposed to a rectangle. So
Correct.
there would be
Oui.
a consistency, if I'm understanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Oui.
tie that all together.
Committee, I'm wondering if we should break this into several votes, that we break the signage apart from the paint, and I'm not sure if you'd like to include the awnings with the signage or do that also separate. Any comments on that?
I agree, we should split it.
Yeah, break it up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, three.
2, 3?
Three.
Okay.
If I may,
Yes.
you can, break up the discussion and come up with conditions, for each of those things, but you can still do it all in one motion if you
Okay.
want. You also can break it up, but it just depends on, there's nothing wrong with combining all of it into one motion and listing out your amendments.
Okay, we've done it by breaking it into separate motions in the past.
And
It's
that is
yeah.
also acceptable.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
First, we have options. Well, let's focus on signs to start with. Are there any other questions of the applicants regarding the signs? Then we'll move it into Zoom. Well, let's move it into the room. Anybody else in the room that has any comment? On Zoom, please raise your hand if you have comments. Okay, committee discussion about the signs.
I like it. If this one is a vote, I would be agree. Like it.
Claire,
Okay with the signs.
clarifying?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
okay with the signs.
All right. Shall we move on to awnings then? Okay.
My question is the awning, the iron ore, is that correct?
The iron ore is the paint color for the railings and the front door that we're proposing, which is like a grayish
Sure.
black.
I heard.
And so then the awning itself would be it's kind of a true black to match that.
Thank you.
Right. Any comments? Public? Okay. Then let's move on, looking at this as recommended by Chelsea, to paint color. Public comments, we'll start with the applicants here. Any comments about the paint colors?
So when we originally were supplying Sophia with paint information, we had wanted to go with that white and black color theme that's been seen a lot through the city, and Sophia advised that the city's looking to stay with more colorful designs. So we tried a lighter green that I would say was the color of this carpet, and we didn't feel like it looked great on the facade of the building. So then we tried a deeper color, the Hunt Club, which is almost like the wall color, but almost a little bit deeper. And it looked really pretty, especially when you look at the building to the left of it that has Fitzpatrick Tavern and the art gallery with that deep like burgundy color from the brick. It complemented the green, we felt like, and then it also ties to the park with the green. And then the alabaster is just a nice creamy white, so it's not harsh. And then the iron ore to settle it.
Where would be the alabaster?
The alabaster goes on all of the, what do you call it, Sophia?
The half timbers?
Yes. Which there's quite a bit on the sides of the building. There's a lot of those.
Okay. Are there any other comments in the room regarding paint, since we're kind of breaking things up? Anybody on Zoom? So committee. All right, we'll start. Thank you.
Personally, I would prefer the half timbers to be the green and the building to be in the alabaster, just to lighten up the whole feel of that particular area.
We would prefer that too.
We're kind of open
Yeah.
to we just want it painted. And so we just kind of are going with the guidelines that you guys wanted color. So that's kind of where we went, but we're really flexible with it. And so are the owners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, my thoughts are, we have had a lot of debate about dark half timbers. And so to have it in reverse with the dark plaster and then the light timbers continues to plague us. And so I'm good with a dark green, but then I'd still want the timbers to be dark, and then it's very heavy. So I would recommend not doing that. So for me, I would rather see a lighter building with a dark timber. That would be my preference as well.
Yeah, I think the front would be very dark if you do green and black, and maybe too dark.
Okay.
For you, it would be better if it's lighter. It would draw more attention.
Would it be okay to do the alabaster for the siding and then the green hunt club for the timbers? We could even lighten up the hunt club for the timbering so that it's a lighter green. So since you were saying you didn't want the timbering dark, we could go like a lighter, like this color.
Or with more yellow or sienna and lighter. Start to.
Do we have samples of your alabaster?
I don't have it with me.
Yeah, we have a print version, but that's not really true.
The alabaster doesn't seem to be what we're talking about as much as the shade of green.
Yeah.
And I feel maybe 5% lighter, but it doesn't have to be that more dramatic than that.
Right. I think that the accent color will be nice. I would say probably not lighter, and because timbers are supposed to be darker.
Oh, they are supposed to be dark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because they're supposed to be, half split log. So think of it
Okay.
that way, right? So more natural, and I like your reference to the park. I think that's really lovely. So for me, I would, in reverse, as long as alabaster is not too gray, and
No,
it
it's
feels,
like a creamy white.
yeah. So
Soft white.
that's really where
I think the concern that I'm hearing from Jennifer echoes the concern that I have is, I think you've picked a really nice color palette in reverse of what you have. But I'd like to know a little bit more about how white alabaster is. And thinking about that in the relationship to the other buildings across the street and next door to the shoe store. It's hard to know that without having a color reference. What's your timeline for this project for paint?
They're ready to paint, so whenever, is there a way to bring like the paint samples in or meet on site?
That's what I'm trying to that's where I'm kind of going. If there's a potential to delegate this out to committee to work with, but does that need to come back for approval before painting, I believe, which would be next month? And that's the issue with not having samples here, because it's, approving a color based upon the name and your verbal description, you know how colors are.
We do have the paint at the store. If you went on to the next candidate, could we bring the paint in
Yes,
this evening?
I would be willing to do that.
Okay, so we can run
Yes.
to the store after this and get it and then bring it back.
Yes, would you recommend that we do move a motion on what we have agreed upon, or just just to table this until a later point in the meeting?
Yeah, I would say it would be best to just do a motion to continue the item to just like later in the meeting, and then you can deal with it all at once. Because so far it seems like there's not a long list of adjustments, so it might be easier to just do one motion to approve the project, or, with any minor color modifications that you guys decide later. So yes, I would just table the item for now, and then we can come back to it after we hear the next item whenever they're ready.
Okay, and I don't believe we need a vote on tabling it, do we? Or do we?
I think, yes, you should just make a brief motion to
All right.
stay the
so
item until,
I'd like to propose that we table item 4B, discussion and possible action to approve the proposed hanging or under canopy arcade sign, 3 wall signs, an awning sign, and exterior paint for C&E Jewelry at 47 First Street until later in the meeting. Any comment from the public on that?
you don't have to take
No
public
more?
comment on that.
Thank you.
Motion.
Have a motion.
Yeah.
Yes, that motion.
Okay, I have a first, a second on that.
Second.
Okay, motion's been first and second. I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it passes 4 with an absent. And if you do have a paint palette, bring back your sample. But if you have a palette at all, bring whatever you can, okay? So that if there's a modification that needs to be considered, we'll be able to move forward this evening rather than putting you off a month.
Perfect, we'll be right back.
Okay, all right. So we're going to move on to item 4C. Let's see.
Atterdag Road.
I need to get that item here to read it. Okay, item 4C is discussion and possible action to provide comments on the proposed architecture, colors, materials, landscaping, and exterior lighting for the proposed renovation of Atterdag Village at 636 Atterdag Road. Sophia, could we have a staff report, please?
Yes. So first of all, member Lapp sent me an email. Thank you. I forgot to update the map here, so it's incorrect. Sorry, y'all. So Atterdag Village is in the institutional zoning and the public institutional general plan use designation. They're proposing to demolish an existing covered carport, several retaining walls, concrete stairs, and a planter. In the map, the work will be done in the center of the existing structure. And they're proposing to build a new carport, covered portico, covered entry, retaining wall, and staircases. And the applicant is also changing their exterior lighting. So we're bringing this before you today. The proposed architecture will match the existing building. All the new construction will be painted to match the existing building. So they'll be using Dunn Edwards whale watching on the stucco. They'll be using Dunn Edwards igloo on all wood and handrails, and aluminum gutters will be painted with Dunn Edwards anchor gray, with the downspouts being painted whale watching as well. And then the shingles are timberline in pewter gray to match the existing shingles. So they're going for cohesiveness with what exists or what's going to remain. They'll be using dark bronze for their aluminum fixtures, so for their door frames, and then also for I think 3 of their exterior light fixtures are going to be antique bronze, and then 1 will be black, which is the path light. In regards to materials, they'll be utilizing stucco and hardy board for the new construction for the carport. And then, as I mentioned, they'll be using aluminum for light fixtures and frames. With landscaping, I'm just going to say I was on vacation prior to this. So we don't have a landscaping plan. When I asked the designer who is here and can speak later, he indicated that their intention is to incorporate what already exists throughout the property to maintain the cohesiveness of the new construction. And then in regards to exterior lighting, they're going to use Progress Lighting, LED square cylinder, Progress Lighting, One Light Outdoor, and FX Luminaire TD LED path light. In reviewing them against the code, they do meet the requirements of the code. It doesn't look like the light's going to go above the horizontal, and we're recommending approval. And as I said, the applicant is here. He is on Zoom.
Committee, any questions of staff? Okay, then we'll open it up to public comment. Applicant, I understand you're on Zoom. Would you like to address the committee?
Yeah, good evening, committee members. I'm not sure if you would like me to go through any of the design considerations that were made, or but basically we're just trying to, there is a slightly eclectic range of design to the community, the buildings. And so we're just kind of trying to hit, so it doesn't stick out from any of the different styles that have been so far utilized on site. And the colors, we're just matching the colors that were there. And we did go through and did an inventory of the lighting that was used as far as the design style of the lighting. And tried our best to find something that matched all the different types that have been used while still meeting the dark sky compliance parameters. And yeah, that's really is all.
Would you like to address the landscaping that was brought up with the, there were a lot of details in that?
Yeah, yes. So the not knowing that it was required to have a landscaping plan, it appeared that we didn't need one at the time. What we did was to just leave it so that they could continue the same plants. They have a pretty unified palette of plantings that they're using. I think I think just continuing that was the intention, and so we just left it at that.
Okay, are there any other public comments in the room? Okay.
Yes, please.
Hi, Susan, please,
Hi.
introduce yourself and go ahead.
Okay, I'm Susan Bott, representing the Save Our Stars Committee of We Watch. Our concern is making sure that light is not emitted into the night sky, but only downward to the ground where it is actually needed. The second and third fixtures shown on page E1 appear to be dark sky friendly lamps, illuminating only in a downward direction. However, the first fixture number E5644-20-30K, doesn't adhere to that directive. It is stated to be an up-down fixture, and when I looked at the pictures on their website, it's obvious that light is emitted both upwards and downwards, creating light pollution in the night sky. This would be in violation of Solvang's municipal code for outdoor lighting. In order to utilize such lights, they would need to be under an overhanging roof or covering to prevent light escaping outwards or upwards. Thanks for your consideration on this.
Susan, you weren't quite audible to me, and this was the one specific light fixture that you were referencing. Could you repeat?
It's the first one on that on page E1 of the picture they have.
Thank you.
And it's a squared off cylinder. It's a cylinder that's squared off.
Yes, okay, and I think staff has helped point that out. Are there any other comment? Thank you. Susan, we will address that in just a moment. I'm going to see if there's any other public comments in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Am I correct? Okay, so I'd like to maybe take that question back to the gentleman that I believe is the designer, architect here, regarding the lights. Could you maybe address that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot to introduce myself. My name's Sam Holroyd, and I am the designer for the project. It was entirely unintentional to select a fixture that let light out the top as well as the bottom. I spent the majority of my search trying to find something that was both dark sky compliant and matched the existing light fixtures on the property, and had no idea that it let light out of the top as well as the bottom. So however we have to go about switching that out for something that looks the same as that but lets no light out the top, that would be the best.
Thank you for the clarity, and Susan, thank you for pointing that out. Committee, any discussion on any items here?
No. I had a question about that fixture. If it's a wall fixture, where are the locations on the building where they are located, actually? Because they're
Is that a bit?
on the elevations. I'm looking at looks like wall fix or post fixtures that look a little bit more ornate than this fixture. I don't believe that's
So
the location.
No,
Yeah.
so this one, it's tiny, so sorry.
Yeah.
So it mentions cut sheet 1, so anything that's labeled as 5
Yeah,
would
okay.
be where it's located.
I can't see that with these.
I know.
I don't have my reading glasses, so,
So it looks like, hold on. So here at the entrance,
I guess what my point of the question is that if it's covered by an eave, or that it may not be as a huge issue if it actually doesn't have a clear path to the sky. So that's why I was looking to see where they were located.
Yeah, I think it still must be covered on the top, so I think that there's solutions, potential. I do have a question about the ones that look like lantern lights on this diagram. They aren't indicated anywhere, information about those. I'm looking on A 3.1.
Yeah.
Sounds like,
I have a question.
yeah, go, please.
Sam, so we're looking at the east elevation, and I think it caught our eye that they do look like some type of an ornate lantern. Is this P 5644-20-30K in alignment with those?
Yes, sorry. So the traditional looking lanterns that were shown on the elevations, we couldn't find anything in that genre of style that would meet the dark sky compliant requirements. And so that fixture was intended to switch out for those ones that are lantern looking. So the ones that are on the columns is where the cylindrical downlighting is intended to go. And that's more in keeping with the property overall anyway, that the lanterns that are shown there actually wouldn't have matched with anything existing.
So my question is, are you changing out all the lights or just those particular ones?
Changing out all of the lights that are shown as a lantern with a 3x3 grid and clear glass and a hood over. Those ones are all being swapped out for the cylindrical downlights.
That would meet the dark sky compliance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Committee, any other comments?
No.
Then, let's see, back to, I think we've addressed public comment, and back to item 4C. So it sounds as though we have an action on the architecture, colors, materials, landscaping, exterior lighting for the proposed renovation at Atterdag Village at 636 Atterdag Road, with the stipulation that all lights match or meet the dark sky code compliance and are cylindrical in nature. And if you're needing any help with that, there are staff and people to help. So is there a motion as such?
Yep. So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, second from Mary Vaughn. At this time, we'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So motion passes 4 in favor, and Chair Kavanaugh absent. I just wanted to add a comment that that I frequently am up at Atterdag, as my father is now resident there, and I think this will be a big improvement to the property and the way the traffic flows. And I know that it's been a long time coming, and I'm looking forward to seeing the improvements. And I encourage that the landscaping be carefully considered to both screen the building as well as, you know, complement the environment. And looking forward to seeing it completed. Okay, so with that, we will move on to item 4D.
Once again, I have to recuse myself.
Okay, Member Ladd will be leaving the room.
And I know we all know the reason, but if you could just state for the record the reason one more time, thank you.
I will recuse myself from item 4D because I live within the 500 feet rule to recuse myself.
Thank you.
All right, we'll wait for you to step out, but we will start. The item is 4D, discussion and possible action to provide comments on the proposed renovation and expansion of Denmarket Square at 1693 Mission Drive. I'd like to start with staff.
So I will say I'm not planning on speaking a lot because the architect is here, and as we have done with like preliminary or conceptual reviews in the past, they speak for the majority of it. But just to give some context, they're requesting a conceptual review for a proposal to convert Denmarket Square, an existing commercial and office building, to a 30-room hotel. There's actually a new set of plans in your blue folder that will be up. Sorry, I know. Yeah, 30. There's a new set of plans in your folders that will be uploaded tomorrow for the public. We received them today, and they figured out how to get 32 rooms. So Julie will be speaking about that with you. The plan includes keeping Chomp in the location, or one of the restaurants, and then the coffee house as well. And they're proposing a 3,620 square foot addition to be constructed towards First Place. And they're, from everything that I've read, they're proposing to utilize a lot of what currently exists. They're wanting to open up sections of it to create more natural light and to facilitate the creation of these rooms. Again, just for you all and for the public, the conceptual review is just for you to provide comments based on the compatibility to the design guidelines and the general plan community design element. And these are not binding comments that you are providing to the applicant. So I will stop there.
Okay, at this time, we'll open it up to public comment. Understand that the applicant's representative is present on Zoom.
She's in the room.
Oh, excuse me. Please come up and address these. And as you go, could you please tell us if there are changes that, point out changes that may extend beyond the number of units being increased, so we can have a comparison as to what we've studied?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
So my name is Julie McGeever. I'm a project manager that works both Ed St. George and On Design Architects. And so I'm really excited about bringing this project to you. I'll put it out there right from the very beginning, we're very open to comments. The intent on this project, is there a chance to show the PowerPoint briefly? There you go. So this gives you a general idea of where the project is located. We're looking to retain the building footprint with the exception of, you'll see the small addition facing on to First Place. That adds on about 3,600 square feet of square feet. The building height will remain the same, so largely the building envelope will be retained in its original shape. Some historical elements that I know will be important is the Little Mermaid fountain will stay in place. And if we could go to the next slide. This will just give you a little general idea, a little bit of color. The partnership is to be made with the existing owners of the project who are longtime community members. The intent is that it will continue to be a community resource, and the owners will continue to be community members that are very vested in its success. It will maintain the Chomp restaurant. And in looking at the design vernacular, which we're going to roll into, there was a discussion of definitely this is in the TRC zone, maintaining the Danish influence, but maybe moving a little bit away from the whimsical approach that has been used, let's say from the 50s on, and looking at something that might be a little more historically resonant with the agricultural areas that were, in the Danish countryside. So if we want to roll to the next slide, I'll give you some ideas. Let's see. Well, we're still talking a little bit on the use here. So at this point in time, we are proposing to have 32 units. So that's the only change in the project scope, such as you've seen previously. That does change the parking calculation slightly, but we still continue to be overparked. We have 7 additional parking spaces. That anticipates a parking space for each one of the hotel rooms, and then per code parking for the restaurants, as well as employees of both the hotel and the 2 small restaurants. Let's see, before we go there, one of the things that's also very important to this particular partnership is looking at the envelope of this project and really thinking forward in the future with regards to Title 24, making sure that we can get significant R values, making sure that we really look at water use on this site, and really bringing all of that up to a contemporary interpretation, anticipating that a project like this would be very relevant for the next 20 to 30 years. The units right now, there's a mix of store spaces, office spaces, and the Chomp restaurant. They're all month to month. There's been a struggle over time to keep them full, and over time there's been a discussion of what's the best use here. Certainly a pedestrian use would be important, and the discussion has been had that a hotel use would be a good way to go, but a hotel use very, very specifically focused on the local flavors here, and not just within town, but as you've seen in many of the newer hotels or newer interpretations of the hotels, really buying into the agriculture in the area as well as the viticulture. So there's going to be a lot of influences relative to that in this project. Okay, so this will give you an idea of the first floor plan. Again, we stay within the building footprint. We are opening up some of the common areas on this first floor. Those common areas would be undercover, which will play into some of the concepts we're going to share with you with regards to landscaping. I will put it right out there from the beginning. We have not gotten into lighting, and we have not gotten into detailed concepts about the landscaping, just because the design itself and its use is going to be worthy of a lot of discussion, and we really want to capture that first, integrate it into the design, and come back to you with a more refined concept. So you'll see the Chomp restaurant stays in place. We have a small restaurant that's directly across from that. We would continue to have outdoor seating in all of those areas. There's a tiny fitness area that's relative just for the hotel uses itself. There is all of the hotel rooms. They all have access out into the open courtyard, which is kind of fun. And then you'll see at the very front, there's a lobby. It's meant to be very informal. It's meant to not feel like a hotel space. It will have a tiny, small wine bar that will be for the hotel use, to kind of focus on the local winemakers in town. There'll be an area to sit. The intention is that you can check in remotely if you'd like, but we will have staff on hand to do the physical check-in and escort you to your room. There's a variety of unit sizes ranging anywhere from 300 to 800, which I think is kind of cool. So you've got a variety of different products. So that's the first floor. It is served by an elevator. We'll go to the second floor. So up here, we just have a continuation of hotel rooms, again, various different sizes. They all have a small snack bar counter with a sink. That it's anticipated that there would be a microwave and a small refrigerator, so they're not full kitchens by any means. And then you'll see in the center of the walkway, it opens up into the lower level, so there'll be a lot of transparency between the floors. Go to the next. Okay, so these are some of the earlier images that we were pulling from. We wanted to be as historically accurate, but also looking forward to the future. And we found that there was an awful lot within the agricultural heritage, an awful lot of use of stone. So that was important. Surprising, but perhaps not. There was quite a bit of metal roof use throughout the buildings. There is some portions of some of the buildings that do have, the more typical thatched or tiled roof. But so one of our ideas that we want to put before you is that it would be a standing seam roof on top of this structure. Again, that gives you better R values. Although we're not in a high fire area, it is our reality now. And being aware of that and being prepared for that is not a bad thing. And we're also looking at something that is completely non-reflective, kind of dulled out, has a vintage quality to it, so it blends in with the stonework. So next. These are just some other elements from photographs that we've pulled from. And you can see we have the high-pitched roofs, which work very well with the existing architecture here. And again, we were trying to embrace what we had and move forward with an adaptive reuse that could reuse as much of the building mass as possible, but give it a new, refreshed look that was, again, moving more towards something that might be more historically accurate rather than whimsical. So next. So here's our initial visioning. You can see the standing seam roof at the top. Again, this shows up a little shinier just so that we can pull it out, but it's intended that it would be a dulled, very soft color. We'll come back with more details and finishes in our next go around. We're looking at board and bat siding, so that's historically accurate. In this case, it would likely be a cementitious or a hardy plank that could be fire safe and would have a better maintenance value over time. And then you'll see that there's quite a bit of stone veneer. I think in our color sample board, we call it out as Santa Barbara sandstone. That doesn't necessarily have to be the stone that we choose, but a stone element that is reflective of the historical character that we were exploring. And so this vision right here, this is facing from the parking lot at the rear. This is actually one of the prettier elevations, but it just happens to be that's where we had the most to work with. So you can see it's got the really nice arches, and you can enter in from the rear. The entry and exit into this project is going to remain the same. Again, all the parking is at the rear. And the other important element is that we wanted to maintain the building height so that it stayed consistent with the expectation of all the surrounding uses and the impact of this building, and certainly with the newer multifamily that's currently being constructed behind this. Next. This gives you a flavor of the project facing Alisal Road. So that's a side element. Again, a lot of articulation, a lot of use of different materials to provide breakup. Again, playing still to the flavor and shape of the area, but envisioning different use of materials. Here are some of the materials that we are proposing for the project. As we said, a metal roof, again, very, very subtle and dulled and non-reflective in nature. And these are the initial colors that we have pulled. And again, we're very, very open for comments. This is first stage. Again, very, very early ideas for landscaping. Obviously, much of this is hardscape, and we do have some planter beds. So much of it is going to be a pot-bound landscaping. Fortunately, because we're going to have such dramatic cover, especially at the first floor, it'd be fun. And we know that we have a very unusual microclimate in Solvang to begin with. We'll have the opportunity to have a little more lush landscaping at the interior that would still be drought tolerant. So we're going to have more fun with that once we have your feedback. And we don't have a landscape plan at this point intentionally, just because we want to get your general ideas. That's it.
Okay, we'll open up the comment to anybody else in the room. Okay, how about on Zoom? Anybody on Zoom? Raise your hand. Do we see anybody there? Okay, then we'll bring it back to the committee. Okay, who wants to start?
I have a question.
Yes.
I love the project, the courtyard, the European flair, but I have two questions about the roof and the color.
Okay.
The color seems a little bit Californian to me.
Okay.
I wonder if it could be more sandy with a touch of rusty, or something more European.
So could you say that one more time? It's rusty.
Just the color. Is it wood? Here, this part.
The cementitious wood, yes,
Oui,
and the
parce que
panel, the
sinon,
board and bat.
We have the feeling of the industrial look.
Okay.
And if you use more sandy reddish color, it would be more European.
Okay.
And the roof, bon, it's metal. In France, slate would be wonderful, but slate does not exist here. But so I guess the metal roof is okay.
Mary Vaughn, can you speak into the mic?
Oh, I am sorry.
It's okay.
So I was speaking about the color because this brand, I love the project. I think it's beautiful. I love everything. But it's just this thing, the color is not European.
Okay, so you want to see it move to a warmer reddish color
Oui.
and not so dark.
Sandy, reddish, not red, but sandy, reddish, how to describe, rusty, pale
I'm
rusty.
getting where you're going with that.
Pale
That's good
rusty.
feedback.
Yes. And the roof, like I said, like imitation of slate would be good, but it would be too expensive, so that's fine.
I really appreciate you bringing the project. It's exciting to see that corner get a lot of heartfelt thoughts about it. That's exciting. I'm really like the stone detailing of the building. And I think that the stone is a really nice element, a design element that is traditional and fits within the general plan and the guidelines that are written today and that we've been working on for a couple of years now. Where I just have to deviate is that everything above the stone line in terms of the board and batten, it's coming off, unfortunately or fortunately, but it's trendy right now. And so it's feeling like less historic and more on trend. And so again, going back to sort of our design vernacular for the future, for the next 20 years, we really want to try to stick to the half timber architectural design because it is what really sets this community apart and makes it unique. And so to the extent, unfortunately, that the board and batten has become trendy, it sort of kills that for you, I think, here, because it's everywhere right now. So I would recommend making anything above the stone wainscoting, to stick with half timber and then have a traditional color or pale background with dark timbers. And then the roof is fine, probably, but it's everything above the stone line in terms of that siding, to me, needs to be more in line with traditional Danish half timber.
Great.
I do have a question, which is actually for you. For you. I thought I've been told that there were a couple people who'd written letters that were submitted, and I haven't seen anything in my packet.
We only saw one, and it should be in your blue folder.
Was there? I did not.
Yeah, there's one letter in the blue folder.
Okay.
It was in front of the plans, the new plans.
Here.
And I think Chelsea has one.
Here.
I saw that. Do you? Okay. Okay. I think that we should have some of that in the record too. How do we deal with that?
So everything that's submitted that comes in your blue folder gets uploaded into the agenda packet within 24 hours of the meeting.
Okay.
What we have done for the past couple of meetings is you have read the comment. That's not, I don't think, traditional practice, but you can acknowledge it.
So,
Yeah.
as far as reading, that's just the body's pattern and practice. Some bodies like to read in the letters. Some, read up to 3 minutes and stop reading if the letter's that long. Other just acknowledge that there is a letter and don't read it into the record. So it's whatever if you've been reading them into the record, that's fine. But but the Brown Act doesn't require you to do that.
I do not have the letter. I have this letter from Keith Adler, which I believe wasn't even on this subject. So, Anna Marie, this is what I have in my packet.
So that's for the last item.
Oh, that's what I
Yes.
thought. Okay, so I don't have this one. That said, there is a letter about the design, and I do have some more concerns about this, thank you, about the style. As we're working with the general plan, and Jennifer and I are on the General Plan Advisory Committee, we're really focusing on the Danish architectural style, Old World Danish and specifically, and moved away from the Northern European vernacular that is presently interspersed with Danish Old World in the design guidelines. Stones in Denmark are actually kind of rare. So stones aren't found in much construction in Denmark. So I think that when I look at this design, there's a beautiful design, but I find it difficult to visualize that in the location that's so high profile in downtown Solvang. I walked and I drove through town today and looked at the multiple roof lines. It has many roof lines, very visible roof from many different directions. So I think roofing is really an important element, more so than on some of the buildings in town. I have concerns about how it will fit into the existing environment, which is one of our items that we're tasked with. I hear from my committee colleagues here that the look of sandstone is something that looks good. My concern is if we're trying to make this fit within the guidelines in town, brick would fit within the Danish design vernacular, but stone is outside of that. I agree with needing to do something with board and bat to stay within the design. And perhaps there's a way of even continuing to incorporate that without having to use half timber, but breaking up the face so that it has multiple, because there's so many different elevations, the ability to use some subtle color differences there that would kind of break up the big building.
Just real quick.
Yes.
Does that, you all saw 1420 Mission? That was a large hotel that had different, it broke it up.
Yes.
So I can provide that to her so she can see.
See a sample of
Yeah.
it, yeah, for the other property. The roofing is, like I said, very important, and I understand the concept behind it. Across the street, there is a similar style of roof, and it's been treated to make it appear as though it's, I think, weathered copper. Which, and I'm not saying that it needs to be just like the neighbors, because I also think that you want to have the building be set apart. As I drove up, there were so many different roof lines, and it was so visible. I have a appearance of old world, and I'm not seeing that in this design. So I'm giving you a lot of feedback, which is kind of contrary to my colleagues here a little bit. It's a very important project. I think all of us sitting here are looking forward to seeing the improvements on that corner. It's a high visibility corner with a lot of potential that has not been lovingly cared for, as well as it sounds like this project will make lots of positive differences. It's
Might I
nice.
ask for a
Yes.
clarification?
Yes.
So you were talking about the subtle color differences, and you mentioned board and batten. Are you saying that no board and batten and go to half timber with various different color, or because we have so many elevation facades that we could integrate some different approaches?
I would say that there's room, and I'm looking at my colleagues here, that there is room for some different approaches,
Okay.
as long as it works all in harmony. Any thoughts, colleagues, on that?
Personally, I think it has to be cohesive, and so
Yes.
I guess I hesitate to tell you how to make it cohesive. It is a complicated series of facades and roof lines, and the more you change those facades, the more confused it
Yeah.
could look. So I'm not going to solve that or say that. I would rather have something that's cohesive personally.
Absolutely agreed, because it could end up being very hodgepodge. It's going to be a very careful approach that has to be taken because of the complexity of the building. And there are, like I said, an extraordinary number of different angles to the roof as you look at it, and as such also to the building. And this is actually a more cohesive look with the new style. It's interesting too that there's sort of an arch thing happening there, which is more stylized after the Mission area, which is a separate district. So I think that has to be handled carefully so that you're being clearly within the Danish design, the Danish Village District, as opposed to the new Mission District.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because to me, that was the one sort of architectural element that seemed it was going in yet a different direction, or towards that Mission style. Where's the arcade coming from, right? What's it speaking to? And I know we have the one on Copenhagen, but I don't think it has pure arches in terms of this colonnade pattern, does it?
It kind of does, because it was built patterned after the Mission, when the Mission was totally
okay.
within view of downtown.
Oh,
And
that's
then
why.
it's been modified to have the Danish design roofs and such, so because of the historic approach.
It might be worth pointing out that arch design, which we'll definitely study, is going to be at the rear of the project. So it's going to be facing the residential. And we'll also look, I haven't seen elevations of the residential project, so I also want to evaluate that a little bit more to see how it plays off of it. One other question, because this is really valuable. If you go with the half timber throughout, you're right, we'll have a very, very, very busy building. So if we were to look at, I understand the need for comprehensive, cohesive design. So if we had some of the more projecting elements, definitely having the half timber, but maybe a more simplified approach at some of the more continuous rear elevations behind those pop outs, would that be something you would be open to seeing? And I'm not going to qualify with the material.
I think you want the half timber design to be the frontage to Mission, right, and to Alice, all those two sides, and that because those are the view corridor. When you're sitting on 246 going west, right, into town, you see that building and you see Little Mermaid, right? And so I was really glad you were keeping Little Mermaid, because that was going to be one of my first comments. But I think that corner is really, really important, and that the vernacular there, as you're sitting there or standing there, looks consistent with the rest of the village, that you really get a good glimpse of from that first corner, right? So it's less to me about the back of the building that now will front, the parking lot and an apartment building that is going up right now, and more so about that corner, what you see. Yeah.
That said, the apartment building is a Danish design, so and that's answering your question is hard to, like, what would it be? It's kind of hard to tell until you show us some designs. But I encourage you to rethink your materials. Again, it's going to be great to see all of this, a new, fresh look to all of it, and have it be beautifully maintained and utilized, because that building hasn't been well utilized. And yes, keeping the Little Mermaid is, I think it's kind of important to you. As a business, people love to come and see the mermaid and take pictures there. I don't really have any comments on windows and such. I think that whatever the treatments are done with that will be based upon the changes that you come back with the exterior elements. Back to the roof for a minute. If it's not a metal, or if it is a metal, is there potentially something to make it look more old world but still maintaining that? Because even though you're going to have a kind of soft finish to it, it's not shiny, it's still very on trend, because I think this would look awesome in Napa, you know, even out in San Ynez. It's the Solvang location that it's not quite suited for in this style.
It's actually perfect Los Olivos.
It is. It's yeah. It's really lovely.
With just few change, like I said, the roof and the color, it would be fine. Me, I don't mind the stone. I think it's nice.
I'm just
There is stone in Europe.
Yeah.
In Denmark.
not much in Denmark.
Yes,
Yeah.
I went on in Denmark.
Yeah, do you see some? Well, and that was going to be my question for you. Your samples that you showed, were those Denmark? I know there was a brick one in there, which is very typical of what you see in Denmark. But the other buildings that were stone, were they examples that you found from Danish architecture?
I believe they were from the countryside. There was maybe a couple of them that were Northern European. So when you're doing web search, you don't always get it down to definitive where it's from. But we'll dig a little bit deeper into that. That's very good feedback to provide to us.
Yeah, I think bricks are much more common and stone. And there are design books. I actually have a design book with color and design. I'd be happy to lend you if you'd like to. It goes with historic. It's pretty interesting.
I just would say, again, I'm going to repeat myself, but the material is a nice choice because it's an elevated material. So while I know it's exceptional in Europe, it just does increase the sort of high quality nature of a project. And I know when done right, it really does add that luxury, which is a nice element. So that's all. I like that it's there because it does make it seem more profound, richer, and beautiful.
In our next visit with you, would it be appropriate for us to bring a couple different elevations? One that maybe has some stone, maybe one that has brick, understanding that the rest of it you would like to see more traditional, a little bit more half timber. I think that will resonate if you see it side by side, and you'll know.
Yeah. I think that would be excellent.
That would be great.
Yes, please, please
I
do.
have a question for Sophia. I read in the proposal that whatever we said, it would be the city maker who will take the final decision. Am I correct?
So for tonight's meeting, you're providing comment. Eventually, they'll bring it back, and it'll have to go through a full development plan process, which means that it would come back to the design review committee and then go to the planning commission for final approval.
This is just a first step, and if I understand, you're talking about potentially coming back with another conceptual design
Quite
for
likely.
discussion.
I think we have enough commentary that it would be useful for us to do that. And our goal is to hit it closer to the mark before we put in the development application, so people
Yes.
are happy to see it coming in. And this has just all been very, very good feedback.
I have a couple more, couple questions for you. I think of the way the restaurant, Chomp at the front, the coffee house, and the new restaurant that's coming in. When I go over to that property, I park at the back and come in. Where is the parking for those businesses, and what's the path of travel? It looks like it's through the hotel lobby from the back parking lot. There is a concern for me, and it's probably not necessarily our committee that makes these determinations, but I think that parking is kind of a big deal on this project with the businesses that are the food service businesses, with your employees, looking at potential access for service vehicles and how all that's handled. Again, that's not within our purview, but those are considerations that you might need to look into. And expanding it to 32 units does concern me with the restaurant there. And is the restaurant one that will be open to the public? as well as your
So-
guests?
Chomp will be open to the public, and there's no longer the small little coffee house. It was getting very awkward to have too many public spaces around hotel rooms. So now, in the newest design, it is just a smaller restaurant that's intended to serve guests on site and do room service and things like that. It would be open to the public technically, but it's small. So it'd be just Chomp and that particular restaurant. We have 62 parking spaces, so I think we're in a very good place. You also don't want to overpark, right? And more so, it'll be an issue of policing, so that you don't have tourists that park there and go someplace else. But from a perspective of this use right now, we're technically still overparked by 7 spaces.
Okay, I'm looking at the revised plans here, and I do
And
see that.
that anticipates an abundance of employees. That's 8 employees for the 2 restaurants, plus up to 10 employees for the hotel, which it won't have that many on a day-to-day basis.
And we'll, once they submit the development plan application, we do an initial review for completeness and cohesiveness with the zoning regulations. So we'll look at parking calculations according to the code.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that locals are noted for is that parking lot also kind of becomes a bypass there too. So that'll be interesting. Let's see.
I had one other thought was, as today with Chomp's outdoor seating area, just to keep, to consider what that looks like in terms of how it's treated to the street, because right now with the planters, it still looks quasi, temporary in a way, right? And not, part of the development, so.
That has been discussed and contemplated, that Chomp's exterior facade and the outdoor use will all be upgraded as part of the conceptual plan that you see next.
Okay.
That was my concern as well. The landscaping, I'd like to, next time when you come, I don't expect you to have a fully detailed plan with landscaping. And I understand that, clearly it'll be a lot of pots, especially with your interior courtyard. Was the intent on this plan to have some actual physical planters within that courtyard, or just have it be potted plants in there?
We
Can't
haven't
tell.
really gone into great detail. If there's a potential to place planters that will be able to actually have plants that thrive, certainly. And if not, then we will have very generous sized pots that you'll have enough depth for root propagation.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the plan, and of course, as with all these plans, part of what softens the building is the plantings on the building.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to encourage that consideration, understanding that there are minimal planters there, but that will make a difference as well. Committee, any other?
No.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
It's been really, really valuable for us. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We look forward to seeing the next iteration of things. Okay. All right, can we call in
Yes.
Chairperson Ladd? Thank you, committee, for your input. So at this time, I think we could call back into, go back to item 4A, was it?
B.
Yeah, 4B, yeah. And bring back the item that was tabled. So back to 4B, discussion and possible action to approve the proposed hanging or under canopy arcade sign, 3 wall signs, and awning sign and exterior paint for C&E Jewelry at 476 First Street. I believe we've had the staff report, the public comment, and the applicant is back with some color swatches to continue the conversation.
Should we bring them up here?
Please.
Okay. So this is the alabaster. Wet. Here, I'll just give you this.
Is
It's wet.
it wet?
Yes. Yeah, it's right there. We had to run to the store. These are some other options if you wanted to go with like more cream. Another one's was called.
Is there just one sample for us to share here? Okay. Yeah, if you'd like to join us down here, and you can use our mic. It's kind of wet to pass. Here's, the green is painted on a yellow Post-it note, which is a little deceptive.
That's why I tried to do it on
The light is on the kind of, outside, there's your softer light. That's more of the natural daylight.
You still look white.
Kind of putting these by the green here. Do we have another green? Can we use your green sample? Yeah. We're playing with the samples here.
You would keep the green? It's not too green?
Okay, so let's do. Highly technical work underway here.
Same with our highly technical samples.
Okay. So
And this is the one that we,
That's alabaster.
the alabaster.
the alabaster is the whitest, the
That's too
kind of,
bright.
yeah. Should we?
It's
mo-
out.
No.
Okay. All right. If anybody wants to speak, feel free to use my
We-
mic.
Not
Okay.
this one.
Swiss coffee, I've used that in a lot of other design work, and it always
This one.
shows up beautifully.
Brings a good warmth.
It's the kind of yellowish.
Here we have this.
Okay, Swiss coffee, which is in my house and many others.
Member Lap prefers the linen.
Yeah.
Okay.
The linen.
Yeah, member Dryden Hess prefers the linen too. I think the Swiss coffee and Navajo white are too cream. They're too pink for the green.
And ivory, the same, is too yellow? Is that, do you have the eye here?
Here's linen.
And here's the
We have
ivory.
linen over here. Oh, the ivory.
We have linen over here as well.
The one with a hint of yellow.
I'm still a linen fan.
Lap votes linen.
Yeah. I haven't changed my opinion.
Okay,
Here. if you want.
here's the samples. Okay, so at this point, discussion and the action to approve the proposed hanging sign and the under canopy arcade signs in oval.
To ask if we can change the signs that will be on the sides, the ovals, to a black with a white writing instead, since the building will now be white.
Okay, go back to that. That is,
The-
let's go look at
the
our,
signs with the carved flowers. Instead of the flowers and the C and E being in black, change the sign to black and have the writing be white with
In
white
reverse.
flowers.
so it's
Want it in
reversing it.
Reversing it.
To go along with the reversed colors for
Correct.
the exterior.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's similar to their hanging sign that you had.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. So, that would be approving the proposed hanging and under canopy arcade signs, the 3 wall signs with reverse colors of body black, lettering white, awning sign, exterior paint with the, please give me the number of the hunter green.
I think you, hold on.
The hunter
Hunt
green.
Club.
The Hunt Club half timber and the Clark Kensington CWW6 linen for the body color with the same dark railings
In iron ore.
Iron ore.
in iron ore. And the, okay, I think that's it.
Quite
Did we
impressed.
get it all?
I'm quite impressed with that, Esther.
She told me I had to do that. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A sec-
Hi.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay, was that clear? All of that? Okay. So let's call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. So that's passes 4 ayes and 1 absent. Thank you.
Yeah,
Can I
thank you.
take
Thank you for doing that.
Yes, here are your samples. You can take the wet one too.
Way to think on your feet.
for letting us do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Way to think on your feet.
Yeah.
Valley Hardware.
I appreciate that you came back with additional samples so that we could move forward for you tonight as well. Look forward to seeing it. Best wishes.
Yeah, little look great.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's see. We are on to
To sign.
4E. Sorry, I'm lost in my
I
paperwork.
Wanted
Would you-
to see if you all wanted to take a quick break since we're going to be going into like heavy discussion about flags.
Let's go ahead and adjourn for 5 minutes, and we'll come back for the final item here.
Okay.
Do we have an estimated time you think this might?
I'm going to say we can either get through all of it or stop at a certain point because it is going to be a long.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're 5 minute break.
It's okay, yeah. So
Okay.
it's up to you, it's up to
Okay.
you
Okay.
as we go through
Okay.
it, because it's gonna be just a lot of discussion.
Yeah, okay.
And we don't wanna keep you here we anticipate it to take several meetings, Jennifer.
Oh, okay.
And since we are adjourned, I think we should.
What?
Since we are adjourned, we should refrain from further discussion.
Oh, just the length of time. Calling back to order at the Design Review Committee meeting for April 20, 6:46 PM. On to item 4E, discussion and possible action to provide direction on objective standards for flags in the city to inform amendments to Chapter 13, which is the sign regulations of Title 11 zoning regulations of the Solvang Municipal Code. Staff, please.
So I am not going to go through the staff report. We're going to go through slides to frame the conversation because the staff report has a lot of information. And so I wanted to try to break it down in chunks. So we'll see how this goes. I've been thinking, I thought about it while I was on vacation, how I was going to address it. And then, so we'll just get started. The first thing I want to say is you do have public comment about street banners. This is not a conversation about banners. It is a conversation about flags. So I want to put that out there for everybody watching and for you all. Why we're doing this is because there is case law, Supreme Court First Amendment case law, that indicates to jurisdictions that we cannot regulate the content of flags. So that was in City Attorney Fleischman's, I think it's August 18th of 2022 staff report. Our flag regulations must be objective and content neutral in order to be enforceable from a constitutional perspective. So that's why we are having this conversation.
Can I jump in
Yes.
just a little? So there are, not to get too far into the weeds, but there are some points where you can have content-based regulations, but the standard of scrutiny and in a court, so if your rule was challenged, is very, very high. So it's hard to meet if you're going to regulate speech based on its content, especially non-commercial speech on a sign, something like that. So, or a flag. So because that standard's so hard to meet, the recommendation is that we make objective, content neutral signs. So that's not to say that, like, there are, I just don't want you to get confused that there are, like, out in the world, there are, there are standards that might seem like there are regulating on content, but so it's not like all across the board those are wrong, but generally content neutral and objective is where you want to be because the standard is so high to meet. Like something that's just, we don't want a sign that we only want, Denmark country flags. Like that's not going to meet that standard. So that I just wanted to add that. Hopefully I didn't make it more confusing.
And Chelsea will be jumping in all the time. So in the process that we're going to be going through, so we're bringing this to you all to talk about how we want to craft these content neutral objective standards because you are the ones that enforce the sign regulations in the city. Then the next step is we'll take it to the Planning Commission because statutorily, according to code and I think state government, any change to the zoning regulations, which is where the sign regulations are, have to go through the Planning Commission for them to recommend change to the code to the City Council. So it's going to be quite a lengthy process. I felt this was important just to level set what objective and content neutral means. And actually, Chelsea, if you could take this one.
Yeah, so objective means that you're not having to use your subjective judgment. So think numerical criteria. Like a good example in the planning world would be a setback is 20 feet. That's an objective criteria. You can measure that the building is that many feet away from the property line, and there's no, it's a fact. There's no judgment that really needs to come into play there. So, then they're uniform and verifiable by external criteria. Like you can go measure it. So that's what an objective standard is. It doesn't have to always be like a number like that, but that's a good example. And then content neutral means that you're not distinguishing and regulating differently based on what the flag says or what it has on images or words, what it has on the face of it. So, you can regulate, like having color palettes or things like that can be definitely something that you can do, but you can't say we only want United States flags, or we only want, no flags that say, certain messages about, only like, or you could say we can't have a rule that says like only the name of your business on a flag or something like that, because you're regulating what the flag says. So it has to be content neutral and not differentiate just based on what the face of the flag is.
Historical flag. Historical flag, But what about somebody who leases a space? It's the choice of the owner, not the renter, for a space, commercial space.
So that's not going to be something that our code will address. We're talking about standards for what flags are going to be allowed by permit or what flags won't need a permit. Who gets to display what between a tenant and a owner of a property. That's not something that the city would decide.
Okay.
Yeah. So whoever is going to display the flag would need to meet whatever standards we set forth for flags.
So in other words, what you're saying is that I think I'm on, our purview is like color palettes, generally speaking. Not
That was
words,
yeah.
nothing, just.
And quantity and size.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
exactly. Height of flag poles, that
Right.
kinds of things.
Yeah.
And
size of flag.
We'll get through it.
Yeah.
We'll get through. We have a couple questions for that. So we'll.
Color, though. That was interesting.
We did include in the staff report that like examples from other jurisdictions. So I think it's either Westlake Village or Beverly Hills. They have like a specific color palette, Westlake, or are you familiar? Yeah.
Everything's brown in Westlake Village. It's just like you can tell from the 101 when you drive by, because even the Target sign is brown.
Oh my God, I'm gonna notice it in a different way now. Okay. Or like Beverly Hills, for example, right? You have a residential, you have residences that can display 2 flags, banners or pennants per 50 linear feet of street frontage. So it's very specific, like Jennifer said, number, size, etc. So that's what we're looking at, and we'll show you the definition of what we have for flags in the code already, or it's actually the regulation regarding flags that contains some objective criteria already, but we definitely need to expound on it a little bit more. And
Chelsea, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're talking about just in the commercial sections of the community. We are not addressing residential. Am I correct in that?
So the applicability of the sign regulations is all lands in the city of Solvang.
Okay, thank you.
And so like commercial speech is able to be regulated a little bit more than non-commercial speech. Flags, often do not have commercial speech on them. Like it's an agent's, it's the flag United States, California, other countries, holiday flags, whatever.
Dodgers.
Yeah, teams. So, the really strict scrutiny is more for non-commercial speech. So often, the signs that you're dealing with, like that's a business name and things like that. And so there is a little bit more leeway there. But that's partly why we wanted to pull the flags out. Though I will say what we come up with flags will kind of be it's like a test case, lessons learned for how we might improve the overall sign code down the road. So, we are focused on flags now, but know that we are aware that we might need to work on the overall sign code as well later, so.
Yes, very much, yes. And then just for expectations, we don't want to rush the process. If we get through half the material tonight, that's okay. We want to be thoughtful and intentional, and that requires taking time, and we expect this at least 2 meetings potentially more. And then y'all are already demonstrating my second bullet, which is just ask questions as we go along. We're here to offer solutions, and we want to really collaboratively problem solve this. So that's why I tried to set it up in like short little snippets. So let's get into it. The sign regulations of the city of Solvang are in Title 11, the zoning codes, and I think it's Chapter 13, which are the sign regulations. And they outline a series of things, including applicability, which I mentioned before. There's a section on exempt signs, flags, and devices. So if you install a flag or sign or device that meets the criteria in that section, you just get to install it. You don't need to get a sign permit. There's another section that outlines prohibited signs. I always tell folks when they come into the office, although there are signs that are listed as prohibited in there, some of them have exemptions that like you can get a permit from the city manager. So they're not quite prohibited. There's often like a caveat about like, unless you go to the DRC or unless you do this. So that, in line with what Chelsea was saying, that's some cleanup stuff to do. There are sign standards, and I feel like it differentiates between permanent signs, which are the signs that come to you all, and then temporary signs, and there are two subsets of that we'll be getting into later. Then the process for sign permits. There's two sections, in fact, on like requesting modifications or exemptions from the sign regulations. Modifications are very specific to like height and number of signs, and exemptions are really if you're requesting anything outside of that, you would have to go through a different process. It outlines non-conforming signs and the process for that, enforcement, and then definitions, which we actually utilize quite a bit to try to understand what we're working with. So sign definitions, when I presented recently to the chamber, a lawyer on the board was like, oh, so signs are like very expansive in what the definition is. So it speaks towards items that advertise businesses, products, goods, services, or otherwise promote the sale of objects or identify objects for sale. Item 2 is to identify, to direct, or to inform persons concerning businesses, areas, entities, services, or dangers. And item 3 is to attract attention to the premises or other signs of a particular business or entity, including but not limited to things like flares, flashing lights, color changes, flags, bunting, pennants, I should have bolded pennants, and other moving objects. And in the code, that's typically referred to as attention-getting devices. The flag definition is a piece of fabric of distinctive design that is used as a symbol of a nation, state, city, agency, or as a signaling device that is usually displayed hanging from a staff or halyard to which it is attached to one edge. Also, I know you guys see this. I'm reading this for the public, just a heads up. In Chelsea's and my conversation about how to present this when we're looking at finally bringing it forward to you, we looked at the definitions and identified 2 other potential sign types that could fall within the umbrella of flags. So feather flag signs were one of those because essentially that is also a flag sign that's attached to one side, which is very much, we felt, within the flag definition. And the other one is our pennants, similar thing. And so moving forward, when I talk about flags, hopefully this is helpful. When I say flags, I mean feather flag signs, flags, and pennants. So to our first question, do you agree with staff's inclusion of feather flag signs and pennants under flags? And are we missing any other types of signs or devices? I know I'm putting you on the spot. So this could be something that we have initial conversation, but we come back to later so you can do some homework for the next meeting.
I believe you said we are not addressing banners. That is a separate item. Am I correct?
Yes. And if you want, I can talk to why. The way that banners are defined is actually a sign that is affixed like on 2 sides rather than on one side, which is why we did not lump banners into this conversation.
That's fine. Just clarity for me. I thought that you'd said that. Any thoughts on?
I'm racking my brain.
You did a good job.
And,
We're-
if there's another,
I hate the pen.
Yeah.
flag. I think they're ugly.
I think that, I'm wondering if, are there going to be, within that flag and incorporating all those three different things, are there going to be the same rules applied or the same regulations applied to feather flags, and pennants?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
That's something you guys could advise us on, for if you think there should be different standards for like your regular flag or a pennant flag or feather flag.
This is why this will take several meetings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because my initial reaction is that a flag is something that would probably be up regularly and kind of, there in place most of daylight hours, whereas a feather flag and pennants seem more as attractions for an event or a sale rather than it being something that is up every day,
Oh, no.
therefore a little different. But I'm not sure.
I agree, it would be horrible.
I think a good example of that, Esther, is I don't know if you all saw, but when the Small Business Administration set up after the floods at the library and they had their feather flags out, and that was just when they were there.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, what you're speaking towards.
Right, as
Yeah.
opposed to the business that is opened and has feather flags up
Yep.
every time that they're open.
Yep.
so the only other type of thing I can think of would be similar to a pennant, but the shape would be different. So instead of the triangular shape, it's a square rectangle, or a rectangular shape.
Kind of like
So
a prayer flag.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing racking my brain that I can think of. If it still falls under pennant, then it's fine, but it is a different shape.
So the definition is a small, usually triangular or rectangular flag or multiples thereof.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, I agree that they should be under sign, or under flags, sorry, yes, agree with that statement, and agree that there's nothing, I wouldn't add it. I can't think of anything else to add.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm not sure that they should all go together with the same regulations.
That's
Yeah.
a separate matter. Yeah,
That putting them all three under flag, yes. Having the rules apply to all three, no.
No,
Does that
right.
reflect? Okay.
When I was drafting this last night, I was thinking about like choose your adventure books. 'Cause I was like, I wish at my old job, we would have dry erase boards when I would present and we would just like walk through it. 'Cause things come up all the time when you're having these combos. So, okay. Let me take this. Okay. Great. Yeah. Choose your own flag adventure. That's what we're going to call them. Okay. So, the other part of what was in the staff report was changing the definition of what a flag is. So, Laser, can you put the, thank you. So on the right-hand corner, that's our existing definition. And then in the middle of this like burst is the proposed new definition for what a flag is.
It's our shot at it for now,
Yes.
Totally up to your input.
That looks good.
Yeah, I mean, the idea would be that this would be a broad definition, and then, like we were discussing, if there were types of flags that we wanted to treat differently, we can.
It definitely is clearer than the original version, so I'm okay with that.
As with the, free speech and all applied, would this allow each business to have a flag with their own name on it, their own logo on it? Are we allowed to regulate those kind of things? I don't quite know the legality of that.
So I think, to put objective criteria, they're essentially going to get like a number of flags, and they'll be spaced out however you guys think is appropriate, but we can't say like you get one United States flag, one state of California flag, and one Denmark flag, and you can't display any other flags with any other content. Like we can't do that.
Right. And
Yeah.
you can't say, flags, but not commercial flags. That would not be acceptable as well. Am I understanding that?
Let me get back to you on that.
So I think that's kind of significant. If you think about the businesses having flags.
Yeah, like I said, the standard for commercial speech is a little different than non-commercial speech. So I can look into that more and see if we can put some sort of a distinction between that.
Yeah, and there's no regulation of any political signage or flags within the village area. That can't happen.
Right, that would be a content.
Yes,
So political messaging, I think, is one that's definitely more sensitive and hits a very high scrutiny.
Yes.
So that regulating differently based on the content and for that purpose, I think we should definitely avoid.
Yeah, I think of, things like the "Don't Tread on Me" flag and those kind of things, which I'm not in favor of political flags in downtown, whatever your philosophy is, but I believe that falls under the freedom of,
Yes.
yeah, the First Amendment, and it cannot be regulated, if I understand correctly.
We can't dictate whether they have a flag that says that, but we can tell them how big it can be and where they can put it.
Yeah, how high they can fly it.
Mm-hmm.
But to be clear, you're asking whether we can limit the use of a commercial entity flag,
Yes.
like just a
Yeah.
name.
Yeah, like a brand
a brand
flag.
flag,
Yeah.
right? You are. That's what you're.
That is
Yeah,
my
and I will
question.
get
Yes,
I will get a nuanced answer
Yeah.
next time we talk about this.
thank you.
Okay. The other item that I mentioned earlier that the flag regulations contain is the duration of flags. So whether they're permanent or whether they're temporary. So for permanent flags, so these are the existing regulations, so not the definition, but the existing regulation regarding permanent flags. Which is the official flag of a government, governmental agency, public institution, religion, or other similar entity. Flags flown on a temporary basis for purposes of honoring declared national or civic holidays. 2 flagpoles with a maximum height of 40 feet, which are not attached to the building, shall be exempt. Additional flags and flagpoles shall require design review committee review and approval. And then, for temporary flags, it's a little bit more nuanced because there's I'll just show you. Sorry. So there's a temporary sign section of the code. And technically, since these are signs, flags could be grand opening signs. Flags could be sale or other temporary signs. They could be non-civic event signs. So it's not unlike the more permanent flag regulation. The flags fall like under the bucket of these different types that are allowed on a temporary basis. This slide, all of these require getting approval from the planning manager. So you have to get a permit and it goes to the planning manager. It does not come to the design review committee. For this slide, these are other temporary signs. Again, it's a civic event sign that could be a flag or a fundraising event sign that could be a flag. These are signs that are just outright exempt and they can be displayed without getting a sign permit. And then you'll see it has the time limit, the size limit, and the location and number. So those are those objective criteria.
Question.
Yes.
So this leans more towards the banner.
It can. So you are correct. We more often than not for these types of signs get banner requests. You are absolutely correct. However, flags could still. You could still have someone who proposes like a grand opening flag. Yeah.
And no permit would be required, as you mentioned.
For these, yes. I do want to touch on what Chelsea said earlier, which the way we've conceptualized these changes that will eventually happen is that flags will be taken out of the code and just put later in the sign regulations for essentially a whole section on flags.
So that just from a drafting perspective is helpful because we don't have to try to like make flags and signs separate in all the different provisions of the sign code. And especially since there's a lot of the sign code generally that is content based that we're going to have to deal with separately. So as I said, as a test case, we're going to pull flags out, exempt them from the current provisions of the sign code, and create a new chapter, chapter or section.
Are you gonna? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a section. I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever
it's a
the order, where we are in the order, and have that be like all the rules for flags in particular, and that hopefully we can see how the objective standards work on flags that we create, and then use that as lessons learned to tackle the more complicated overall sign regulations.
I will say the good thing about the questions that I had here is I feel like you all already answered it when we were talking about the flag types, which what you said earlier was flags would be more permanent and then feather flags and pennants would be more temporary. So, yay, we answered this question, these two questions. Okay. Yes.
But in terms of the size of them is where I think that also, I don't know if we should talk about it. Some of the sizing to me, seems quite large.
We will next.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So yes.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into like the objective standards for flags, which what you all have indicated is we're probably going to be considering 3 different buckets of objective standards. One for flags, one for feather flags, and another for pennants.
Good.
Sorry, let me just write this down.
Sophia, just one general
Yes.
question. When there's 2 flagpoles that are over 40 feet tall, they're clearly permanent flagpoles.
Yes.
Are there any in the Solvang area?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, there's the one in the former bank building at just to the east of Alisal on Mission.
Isn't there one at what is that real estate?
San Ynez Valley
Yeah,
Real Estate on
San
the
Ynez-
corner.
Yeah. I think there's one
Well,
there too.
there's definitely the one in the park, and I know that going back to my dad at Atterdag, you can look from the patio there, and there are 2 very visible flagpoles in downtown.
Yeah.
And so we have no control over what those,
No. So no, we don't because right now.
size of the banner flag.
Yeah, right now, Laser, can you bring that up? Sorry. So right now it says you can have 2 flagpoles for a maximum height of 40 feet, and it doesn't articulate like the size of the flags. Yeah, which is a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Yes. Yes.
And I know we have 2 flags poles at the museum.
I feel like they're all now. I'm going
They're
to
under
see them
40, but I can't
40
remember.
feet is tall.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
under 40.
It is tall.
But I think that they're,
roof height
I think they're,
Yes.
I want to say that they're closer to 30. So, and it makes it stands out because of that. And I think that's my point is that the height of the flags makes the location stand out very
The
much.
issue, like she was saying, is the size. What is
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
And I mean, you all can say we want a lower maximum height for the flagpole. So that's, yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to a lot of other things. It's kind of defined by the size of the building that it stands in front of. And if you have, like at the museum, we use a 3x5 or 4x6 flag. But if you suddenly have a 8-foot by 12-foot or whatever that dimension is, then it's an altogether different story. Yeah.
But like I said, the maximum roof height in town is 35 feet, and we're keeping it. So why are our flagpoles higher than our roof height?
Agreed. I also want to remind
Agreed.
everyone that our housing element is at HCD, and a comment could be that we have to raise the building heights. So like we'll see when we'll see what happens and if that happens.
Well, and then it becomes a kind of concept of are the public flags, i.e. the flagpole in Solvang Park, you know, should that be kind of like the big pole in town and the others, you know, kind of scaled down from that stand? I don't know how tall that flagpole is in the park. The
I can
World War-
ask and see.
Yeah, World War I flagpole. You know what? That would be an interesting, actually, answer,
Oh.
because that seems to be the tallest pole.
There's
in
also
town.
two at the vets hall.
Right.
Because we had training this week, and
Yeah.
we even commented on one of them needing to get replaced.
And they aren't used regularly, however.
No.
Yeah, whereas the flag in the park is. I think it would be interesting to know.
Okay, I'll
Those
ask.
little laser things to shoot the height.
Just before we move on, I wanted to think a little bit on the commercial question. We can think about ways to do that objectively. Like if you could have different objective standards for different districts in the city. So like residential versus the TRC. And, you know, potentially like flags can't be placed within so many feet of a sign that's been permitted, something like that to, because the problem, it's not so much that you care that their logo is out there, it's that you don't want to have like a wall of the same brand name all over the place. You know, they get a couple signs and that's sufficient. It's not too cluttered. So that I think that's another way to think about it is, you know, maybe we don't need to worry about, we can solve the problem without actually having to worry about the content of the sign, even if it's commercial.
Yeah,
If it was included in the overall allowance for the property size, you know, in tandem with the sign, right? So that
Yep.
you counted it all as one,
Yep.
if that was what they were requesting, then
So-
it
yep.
seems like that would be a fair, you know, you wanted to trade one of your wall signs or one of your hanging signs for that flag, and then the calculation would be the same, right? So you would basically, you'd be at your option, fine, you want to put a flag up instead of a wall sign, but you don't get an extra because you asked for a flag.
That's a great idea.
yeah, that is. I like that.
Maximum square footage.
Yeah.
I'm just going to write that down. Yeah, because when you were saying that, Chelsea, I feel like that would completely eliminate, when you were saying that about not within an X number of feet of an approved sign, that would like completely eliminate flags, I feel like. Yeah. But this isn't, I hear. But that's a really creative way to do it. And then to Chelsea's point, the way that the community design element for the general plan is written is there are 3 design districts. There's your like tourist related commercial or, you know, village area. There's the mission district, design district, and then there's all other areas. So for cohesiveness, we can think about it in that way as well.
And I think that's an important element. And, you know, Jennifer and I know that there's going to be a new design district if the general plan moves forward as is, you know, intended at this time, which will have its also a whole new set of design standards. So,
And this also mimics how the sign regulations are currently written, as you all know. So, okay. Sorry, give me one second.
so I guess the committee is saying, let's look at that maximum height and consider whether that is appropriate at 40 feet or
And
needs
also
to be.
banner size, I guess that's part of the next group of questions.
You mean the flag size?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the actual physical, I mean, the actual
Yes.
flag hanging from the pole, yes. And I think that'll be really important as well.
Height is still undetermined.
And then the size of the actual flag on the pole.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Number.
And then I think also just in keeping with the idea of the flag versus the sign, right? The number of flagpoles should be limited
Yes.
because that's the fastest way to make something cluttered and
Yeah.
overdone.
Well, it's like the project where we had 3 proposed. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
You could also consider regulating like how and what flags can be attached to. Like, do they have to be on a pole? Can they be on an eave or, you know,
Attached to a building versus a pole.
right? Because that might, that's very objective. That might help with the overall like look or appearance. I don't know, just a thought.
Well,
They do in Danish land.
they fly flags everywhere, but they fly them from poles.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very national with the
But are they
flags.
poles like the building?
There are poles in the
jutting-
ground.
Oh, they're in the ground.
They're
they aren't
poles in the
jutting
ground.
From the side of the building.
There'll be places, you think about the UN where you've got, a whole line of flags. There could be some of that, but I think of as really a lot of flag poles in the ground. The
That's a
taller
good
poles.
point, because we do have flagpoles that come out from the building right now. So
Right.
that,
And a lot of those. And do we want to get rid of all of those? I'm not sure if that's the intent, but I think one of the things that I find distracting, to say the least, and annoying at times is when you're walking through town and the flag is hitting you in the face
should
when
be a
you're
height.
walking.
clearance. Yep.
Exactly. That it needs to be out of, my 6'8" son's,
Yeah.
The 7-foot clearance.
And we do,
We're putting that in the objective. Yours.
yeah. Esther's
Committee members
to walk
make
underneath
fun.
it.
without getting smacked in the head with
Yeah.
the flag or losing his hat.
And I think clearance is something that would also apply for pennants,
Oh, definitely.
right?
Yes.
Definitely.
But
Not
for
for
feather
feather flags.
flags, it's not necessarily clearance, it's just basically not in the public right of way, like not encroaching in the public right of way. Sorry, I'm
Absolutely, and I'm not an advocate of feather flags.
Being permanent.
Yeah, except in kind of rare exceptions.
The SBA, I guess, was fine
They are really ugly.
Right.
because of the
Yeah.
situation, but otherwise they're horrific.
Yeah.
And they may have been exempt just because of the entity that they
Correct.
are.
And I don't think any of us or any of the community would be disturbed by a feather flag that's marking a,
Location.
right, for support for the community for a limited, hours on a specific day. But that also makes the impact of that feather flag that much greater by having it be such a limited use as well.
But
So-
we cannot change the shape. Who invented that?
I don't know. I'll Wikipedia it and see.
It stands up.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
really
you can
does.
secure it without it falling over.
I mean, it is better than those like blow up people.
Right, yeah.
A designer should find a way.
Give us,
Right.
we want that demonstration again, please.
I have a friend one Halloween who made her costume and was that. Okay.
This is
So-
what happens at 7:30
I know, I
on
love
a
it.
meeting night.
I love it.
Is it possible to get sample sizes of flags, so we could actually I see that. I'm looking right at
Yeah.
it because it's behind you, but
I kind of go back to
that
the,
would be interesting for us to actually have a definite, clear visual. That is that.
I think you need to see it on a pole, though. I think that what would, again, like the park is a good example of
Yeah.
like the biggest flag, and it's probably at the most 5x7, because I think most of them are like 3x5, 4x6. Yeah, it makes a difference.
And I'll
3x5 exists too.
See, that's a 3x5.
I'll look to see like if I'm sure there's like a standard size of
Yeah,
flag
there are.
Coming from Texas, they have
Yeah.
Texas size flags. So.
Yeah. Yeah. 3x5 and 4x6 are standards. And the flagpole at the museum, we have 3x5s right now, which seem a little small for the height of the pole, because we usually have 4x6. But sometimes flags are a monetary investment. So sometimes it's self-limiting simply because of the cost of the flag, whatever it is.
It perhaps may be clearer for the public if the flagpole is limited to 40 feet, that particular flagpole could have a maximum flag of X. If it's at 35Y and it's at 30Z, something.
So like a gradation similar to what we did for
Good idea.
flags.
Yeah,
Okay. Sorry. Great.
because you wouldn't want a 4x6
Scale.
flag on your,
10-foot pole.
yeah, or on your pole on the side of the building, even if it was out of the clearance, you know.
And just to make it clear for the public, because this is complicated.
Well, and this example of being
be
inside
objective.
is
That's the
very different than if you took
Yes.
this outside. It would
Yeah.
look ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So it does make sense, but I'm a proponent of capping the size of the flag at 4x6, probably. Like, I don't think we should allow anything like the giant, Exxon flag or the,
Agreed.
yeah.
And I would say, again, I go back to the park as the exception because giving it that kind of gravitas in the community as the public space. And again, it may still already just be a 4x6 flag.
I just thought of another objective standard, which is the height of the lettering, like we have in the sign regs right now. Sorry.
So it can't be a 4x6 flag that has open on it in 3-foot tall letters. Yeah.
In the Frederick's courtyard, it's 3x5.
Is it?
I
Okay.
ask. Yeah.
Okay.
And you're right, it would be
In the past.
open, welcome, and they would be gigantic.
Yeah.
So that should be considered.
Yeah, somewhat along the lines of the sign ordinance, I guess.
Okay.
And then I think of a place like she mentioned, Frederick's Court, which I believe has quite a number of flags attached to the building, and it's kind of part of the aesthetic
Yep.
there. So, how is that addressed as well? So,
It's grandfathered in, isn't it?
Right. I was going to say, in general, if we're changing the regulations, so this wouldn't automatically require existing flags to conform, but any new flags that were coming in would have to comply.
what I would like to request, though, is that that the new rules would apply in the form of clearance, so that any flags are out, allow public walkway. And I think that's been the problem that I see in downtown Solvang currently. And I don't know how and if we can, but that would be my suggestion. Unless it's a holiday kind of thing, for a special, like for Veterans Day, they do a great job of lining the park for Danish days, sometimes for pirate football, those kind of like special occasions. We don't want to make that off limits. And there's specific holes in the sidewalk and stuff. Yeah, they line the park there and, have, and that's fun. And I think Solvang is noted for that. So there needs to be a way of allowing that to continue as well.
Because we wouldn't be regulating the content. It would be, okay.
And they're
Right.
temporary. Those are
Right.
Yeah.
And then whether or not that requires approval, that would be, or if that's something that they can just do. I mean, we don't want to put an undue burden on staff or, the veterans or whatever, but you also don't want them every weekend for a different event.
Yeah. That has come up a few times since I started here. Just, since most of the staff is new, what has been the precedent in particular for the St. Inez High School, for the Pirates flags, because they are in the public right of way. And so that's going to take more digging, and I think also reaching out to them to understand the height of their poles and the size of the flags.
Yeah, and they are real tall, and I think of,
They're short.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
would be concerned, maybe Chelsea could address this too, about the safety hazard of them being so short in the middle of the sidewalk. As a liability to the city, something that could be considered.
But I think that's where they'd have to get an encroachment permit that would almost, would it eliminate liability for the city? I don't know. I don't think so.
Well,
No,
and again, it's like, at Danish days, and I think about, we had the ambassador come to town and, had royalty, and we could line the park with flags, and the city was involved, but we just went out and put the flags in for that one short period of time. I think for me personally, I think that's a fun element of town. How do we address that and make it so it isn't an abused, in a situation that's abused?
We're going to have to think about
Yeah.
how to address that.
Yeah, because it's like giving me like street banner vibes. Just
Yeah.
like
Exactly. That's my concern.
okay. Okay.
But it exists, right? The holes in the sidewalk
Yeah.
are there.
Yes. Yes.
And so it's a shame to not use it.
Oh, yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
We're not trying to get rid of that.
No.
We just got to think about how to structure it
Yeah.
with
Yeah, and-
objective standards.
And
yeah.
to clarify the point that I just made, which is banners are regulated in the code. However, there is a separate policy or process for the streetlight banners. So it's not in our sign regulation section of the code.
Right.
So we'd want it to be in there, and we'd want it to be very clear that I would almost imagine it would be like like it would be in that temporary section,
Yes.
right? And we'd still allow it, and there'd be
Temporary
clear criteria.
flags, yeah.
And they'd have to get encroachment permits to allow for that. Yeah, I just didn't. Yeah, I'm just wary.
Well,
I don't want a separate policy. I want it in the.
Yeah, I mean, I think most specifically of the Pirate Pride flags, it's like every football game, and it tends to
Yeah.
just be the guys, the varsity football games that they're putting them out there for. It has to be very carefully defined, or suddenly it's going to become, something that's a hot button issue in a way that
Because
nobody wishes.
somebody might come and say, well, they did it, so why can't
Right.
we do it?
Yeah.
Oh,
That could be something that we don't want to have.
that happens every day in the planning division.
Yeah.
And so we can't say, oh, if it's not a pirate flag, we're not letting it be there, right?
Right.
So that's why I think there's probably a way forward, but we're going to have to think about, and some of this might take shape as we get some of the other criteria set for flags more generally and temporary flags, and then that will help us kind of narrow down, like, okay, what's really the friction point, and what do we want to make sure we're preserving, and what are we worried about. But there might be a margin of things that are going to like be a little different, maybe because we really can't say no just because it's not a pirate flag, or
Right.
not just because of the content.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's a way where it could be something that is, supporting a local nonprofit or something of that nature. But I know that there was an instance where there was a rally in the park that incorporated quite a number of flags, and it was very confrontational, and that is not and divisive. And of course, that's not what the wishes are. On the other hand, the First Amendment does allow for certain things that doesn't matter what your policies and beliefs are, those need to be able to go forward. So
Yeah, a great example is campaign flags.
right,
Any campaign, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and any campaign banner and
Yeah,
sign,
so
and
exactly. So if it's temporary, then you have to think about, okay, so what is the limitation of its temporariness?
Right. And,
Right.
setting a duration, like,
Most
Yeah.
prohibitive, because if you think about it, the investment for a very temporary, that's a lot of money potentially to put 100 flags, and so you're going to have to want to spend that money to do it in a very short duration. That would be, I would think, the most punitive way you could do that.
Yeah.
that's why I said it's kind of self-limiting in some of
Exactly,
this.
right.
The investment, the return on
That's
investment
right.
isn't there,
So-
which is rather crass, but
Right,
but
but I mean, that's
yeah.
behavior. It impacts
Yeah.
behavior.
yeah. So like with the temporary stuff, like the current sign code kind of says things like, it distinguishes between like flags for political purposes or flags for, like real estate signs, things like that. I think we got to be careful about breaking it out like that and having different, we can't do that. But we could say flags that are temporary, and I'm not exactly sure how to word this yet, but, they can only be up for X amount of time. And if they, so flags that are only going to be up for that amount of time, like then they can meet these criteria, where a permanent flag has to meet these criteria. Right. And so that we can have some control over a temporary sign in an objective way. But we just can't like chunk it out based on the messaging. Yeah.
Understood.
Okay.
It's the mental calculus of all of this, trying to.
Yes. And having it be fair and equitable,
Yeah.
ultimately, too.
everybody.
Yeah.
And allow a reasonable amount of activity,
Yes.
and
Yeah, because it's not that we don't like flags.
Right.
No.
But, how does that all work into a new policy and code?
Specific question about flags. Let's say if there is like she mentioned, a political rally, and a flag has a certain message on it. We cannot control that message.
Nope.
Even
Just to
even
be
if it
very
has
specific.
obscenities on it. Yeah.
Correct.
You can control the event though, like if they didn't get a permit,
Yes, that's different. Yeah.
that's
but,
the objective, right? Like,
But in our flag
yes,
regulations, we can't say what they're going to say on the flag.
no swearing.
Yeah, we can't say something like that. There are, like I said, there's a limit at which, at some point, the public interest in regulating the speech outweighs the First Amendment interest in saying the speech, but it's a very, very high standard. And I'm like totally simplifying that standard when I say it like that. That is not quoting from a case law or anything, but at some point that high standard can be met, but
So what
for
you're
all practical
saying-
purposes, we're not going to.
Too high of a burden of
Right.
proof,
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
it?
But what
right?
you're saying is
Yeah.
if it's a swastika, then that perhaps.
It might.
I'm not saying that any particular speech is or is not over the line. I'm saying that there is, there are cases where governments can successfully regulate speech, but it has to be think like a really big safety concern or something like that. Like you can, one example might be like a sign that looks too much like a traffic sign that's right by a traffic sign. It's going to confuse drivers. Like that might be a concern where you could regulate the content of the sign because it serves a particular government interest and it outweighs. But for when we're
Speech, not so much, is what you're saying?
no,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, this is hard. Like I want to be clear. Like I'm trying to give you a practical description of First Amendment law, but it's complicated. And don't take any example that I give as gospel because, ultimately a court would decide. But I'm trying to, it's not very helpful for me to recite the standard to you and say, and those are the flags you can't, that's not helpful. So I'm trying to be a little more practical. But know that, the least risky way we can do this is to be objective and content neutral because we know we can do that.
Once again, size, shape, color.
Right.
Yeah.
Height.
Yeah. And placement.
Location.
And placement, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good for us to know as a committee, as a citizen, it's a little illuminating as well, so.
So I'm gonna keep going, but
Okay.
I'm gonna try to get through it before 8. But I also
That
don't
would-
want to
Perfect.
put
That would be
pressure on
optimal.
closing the
Great.
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah. Okay.
We'll speed it up.
Okay, so yeah, we'll get there. As I mentioned earlier, there's a section of the code that talks about signs that are just outright exempt. So the question here is, should certain types of flags based on objective content neutral criteria be allowed without a permit?
Yes,
Yes, as long as we get our criteria right.
Yes.
yes. And that criteria will vary between the all other and the village area and the mission area.
Yeah.
And then, so that makes sense. So basically, anytime someone wants a modification or exemption, or, yeah, it would come to you all. It just would not be exempt. It would
Yeah.
come to the DRC. Okay.
And clearly, we're not going to make the citizen who wants to put a flag up on 4th of July or something, that's not something that's going to be regulated from this end, nor would you want to be responsible for any of that.
But that
On their
should fall under
residence.
the temporary flag.
Yeah.
What we're
Yeah.
going to say about temporary flags for the all other section. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Or if,
Yeah.
like, let's say, like, I don't know, I'm just making something up, but like a residence gets like one flag, that's X size on a pole or attached to the house, right? Like that would let them put up a flag for 4th of July
Yeah.
Or for spring.
or for spring or whatever.
Right.
I'm making up those standards, but the holiday flags, those kinds of things, I think might end up being addressed by a basic, here's your flag your quota, and you can choose to use it for that purpose, rather than saying you can put up a 4th of July flag, because now we're talking about content.
Oh,
Yeah.
understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cocktail time.
Sorry if
flag,
I keep,
you know.
I think I keep repeating myself, so apologies for that. I'm trying to get at it at multiple angles.
Yeah.
It's convoluted. So the other one is, as I mentioned earlier, there's a prohibited section of the code of the sign regulations. So our question is, should any flags be outright prohibited? So things that we thought of are, for example, no neon color allowed, no flags over 15 square feet, or no feather flags taller than 6 feet. Shouldn't say square feet, but 6 feet. And ultimately, any prohibition on those flags need to be based on objective criteria and be content neutral. So I wonder if perhaps in creating what our objective criteria and content neutral criteria is, if that will help us identify what are those that we absolutely do not want and should be prohibited. I almost feel like that's probably like a step 2
Yeah.
of this process.
And what we can legally.
Yes.
Know the size we're comfortable with.
Yes.
Before we can limit it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the maximum size, and then if it's stepped down
I was also
sizes.
thinking about ornaments, like that, how ornate.
Mm-hmm.
Would you want sequins?
Or like tassels on the
Yeah,
end.
tassels,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yep.
do you want fancy flags?
Or do you want it to have, I've seen some flags that have the lights in the flag woven into the fabric and stuff too,
Illuminated.
Yeah, I was just gonna say illumination.
but not, well, and then there is illumination on flags, which probably
At
needs
the
to be
pole.
addressed, because there are those solar ones that you can put on the top that then go down, but there are also people who utilize the lights, the uplights, so that,
We need to talk about that.
yeah,
Okay.
Just
I
to
just
add
added illumination.
little
Sophia,
complexity.
question.
Nighttime
Yes.
illumination.
How do you feel about a pole with a
How do you?
fish attached? You know how you have those
Oh.
wind
Oh, the wind
Yeah.
sock.
socks?
wind
Is
sock.
that considered to be a flag?
That's a type.
So
That's a type.
That's a
I'm
type.
glad that you brought that up, because I always, as you said, spring. You know how sometimes we have a family friend who puts them out, and she changes them for every holiday. But
Yes,
it's like
the
the one you put in your garden.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
just one
The
little
single,
pennant.
right.
Yeah. So a windsock.
Uh-huh, a wind sock.
That's going to be determined by how we define a flag.
That's
Yes.
So we can decide to be that broad, or we can be more specific and say it has to be attached along an edge, in which case I
Well,
don't
and
think
its
a
shape.
windsock would.
Shape could be objective. So like we only, for flags in particular, only rectangular flags.
Well, my thought
Right?
was, excuse me,
Well, then,
somebody might come up with a workround.
Oh.
Yes, they will 100%
They
come up with
will.
workarounds. We
And
can't
it
avoid
Happens
that.
all the time. Yeah.
okay, so,
No matter what standard you set, that will happen.
and a good example of what would probably not comply here is what's hanging at the museum whenever there's not the regular flags, they're the Danish banners. So the ones we have right now are 3 meters long by about 9, 10 inches wide. and people love them, and they're very Danish. But how would that fit in? So,
Doesn't that go under banners?
they're
But
actually,
they're not affixed 2 points, are they?
they aren't.
Yeah, they're
So it's just-
on the flagpole.
Some
and
of
they're
them
just long.
are made that way, but the
Are
ones
they?
we use at the museum are fixed with one loop, where we have the two loops on the flag when it goes, but they do make them that have 2 points, and I can show you example of that, so that they are not rectangular, and they're long. So drive by the museum anytime that we aren't open, you'll see them fluttering, and they're lovely.
So they're more like a streamer almost.
Yeah, yeah. And one's Danish and one's American. They're called
And
a
what
wimple
about
in
the
Danish.
neon? Because that's not pretty either.
Which one?
Neon.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I figured that would be an easy one because we already don't allow neon.
Yeah.
So,
Oui.
yeah.
because the goal isn't to not have a rainbow flag. It's
No,
to,
yeah.
have certain colors kind of not working within the community.
Okay.
And I don't think that the goal of this committee is to say that all flags have to have brown in them or,
No.
anything of that nature that aren't a state or national flag either.
Shape question is a really interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, I just made it more complicated. Yeah.
That would be the creative section.
Well, and right
Yeah.
now it's kind
Honestly,
of
is
grandfathered.
it organic versus geometric? Because honestly, like a geometric shape would be more traditional, whether it would be a streamer or a rectangle or a triangle, right? A pennant, versus a fish or an organic, or a
But-
dragon, yeah.
But
Or
I almost
windsock,
wonder if
kinda.
we even like say rectangular 3x5, let's say, there is a process where Esther or the museum could come in to ask for approval from the DRC because they're asking for a modification to the to the flag regulations.
Or is it
could be a
grandfathered in?
case,
Yeah,
case
for
by
the-
case.
I mean, yeah, but I'm just
Versus
saying,
in
Yeah.
particular, but if it
Yeah.
was new.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
somebody wanted to put a new Danish flag, whatever you just called them,
Yeah,
in the front of their new hotel, they would have to come in for an exemption
Yeah.
because it wasn't in the regular.
descriptor.
yes.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, that's one of our other questions is like, what criteria should we set for exemptions? And so that also would have to be objective standards. But I mean, the like windsock type thing, like that could potentially just not fit in the definition of a flag.
Yeah.
Because I think the way, well, it's up to you guys what you want to, like the scope of what you want to be included in a flag. I mean, that's partly what we're trying to figure out, right?
Yeah.
One way to define a flag is that it's attached, so that like only one edge is essentially attached. But that doesn't have to be that way. It could be anything that flutters on a pole, like,
Yeah.
A kite.
yeah, like that's,
Fier.
but before, I don't want you guys to get too
Into the weeds.
I
just
mean,
distracted
would
by
would this be a flag? It catches wind and it's.
right. So we do need to think about these things, but in some ways, we're not going to be able to solve every fringe question.
No.
We need a workable standard.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm just, it
Would-
made
Yeah.
me think like. there's
Pinwheels,
Actually, a lot
yeah.
of materials that catch the wind.
Yeah.
Right. So that's probably not enough of a standard.
Well,
right?
Would it
and then do you want a Mylar flag, even if it's a rectangle?
Would it be
You know.
a square footage situation that we could apply if the square feet of the flag is 20 square feet in the band, whatever you called it, is
the
20
dimple,
feet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it opens it up to all kinds of exceptions that may not be as suitable. Yeah. I think that the museum is kind of the exception to the rule, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Okay.
I think that's good though. A mylar, like a mylar material would be, or a reflective, highly reflective
Right.
material would be not permitted.
Or like the lighting of the. We'll look at the attention-getting devices section, because I think that'll help.
It's
Yeah.
like highly reflective, metallic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Neon, things that are like. That's right, but
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Well, I
Also
think you-
potentially like distracting
Yeah,
and
distracting.
Yes.
Or think about like in your, if the sun hits it and it blinds you.
well, maybe
Yeah.
it's a,
You know.
is it a fabric flag? You know, there's
Well,
that,
and
you
Well,
can
it could
put
be
that.
paper. It
Yeah.
could be paper, it could be fabric. It doesn't necessarily.
Cloth or other
Cloth, yeah.
lightweight material,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah.
Well, I think the paper would apply more to the banners as opposed to the flag
Well, and
poles. Yeah.
But the reason why I say this also is because in textile design and manufacturing, especially now, they can make almost anything on fabric. So you can't, I must say that because you literally could have a piece of fabric that looks like it's metal now.
Right. And you can have recycled
Yeah.
plastic.
Yeah.
It's the fabric that
Yeah,
that is
so-
actually maybe better than a cotton or nylon flag. So
Could be
it
on
could be pros and cons.
canvas too.
Right. Which isn't used just because it's so it breaks down in the sun and the wind.
It needs to be gesso. It's prime now. They do
Yeah.
canvas prime and they stay straight.
Also, don't we need to address maintenance of flags to make sure they're kept in
I think that's
high
an
quality?
excellent.
Yes.
And the other point about flags, I just wanted to make one comment that I've seen a couple places where they hang the Danish and the American flag, and where the Danish flag is way bigger than the American flag, which is not really correct, but that they shouldn't be all different sizes of flags. Should there be some kind of consistency? I mean, if you have 3 poles, the middle one could be bigger, but if you have 2 poles, you don't want to have one flag be 4 by 6 and the other one 3 by 5. I mean, you can kind of go on and on that.
Consistent.
Yeah.
okay,
So just a comment there.
okay.
Look at her notes.
Yeah, I'm glad I have these big papers. Another thing we talked about, which I think there's clarity from the conversation that we already had, which is there's different processes, right? If it's a permanent flag, it goes through the design review committee. If it's temporary, you get approval from the planning manager, or it's just outright exempt. And what we were thinking about is, right, we have the objective criteria that we would then apply to flags, and then anything that needs like an exception or modification would then come to you
Yeah, it
all.
only comes to us if it
Yes.
doesn't comply,
Yep,
even if it's permanent.
yeah,
I think that's a really good comment because I think about the fence on Old Mission Drive at that development where if the fence had come, it wasn't compliant. It's best to have something so staff doesn't get stuck in a situation.
Of making that.
So I'm going to touch on that really quickly, but we're not going to go down that path, which is I think we need to revisit that section of the code for the design review committee's requirements, because there's 4 that's very specific, and then there's a 5th one that we utilize for almost everything, which is like it's to the discretion of the planning manager or city manager. And I personally would love way more guidance, because now we just err on bringing everything to you, which I think there's a place for that, but it also then it leaves us scratching our head about, are there certain things that need to come to you? So anyway, that's a quick tangent just because you touched on it, but we're
And
not
is
talking
that
about that tonight.
Yeah, specific to not specific
Yeah.
to flags.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's not specific to flags. It's broader than that. But
Yeah.
yeah, Chelsea's ready to shut us down. So,
Yeah.
okay. So
Off
what I hear for appropriate process is for permanent flags and for temporary flags, if it meets the objective criteria, it just passes through. And then if they're asking for a modification or exemption, then it comes to y'all. Okay.
And if it's a new project, that it's incorporated in the new projects.
Yes.
For instance,
Yes.
Ed St. George with the project with the Italian deli.
And we always do that for development plan projects, especially for the commercial projects, because they're inevitably going to have signs and they're going to come to you all. So we just include it there. So
Yes.
I mean, the way I wrote the staff report for that project is he was given the 2 flags, but he wanted a third one, which is why we were discussing that. Yeah.
I'm also not discussing that. Keep going.
Yes.
Excellent.
I am getting angry.
The only thing I want to touch on this section, and I touched on it earlier, I do not like that we have a section for modifications and an exemption, a section for exceptions. I think it just all needs to be one. So that is the way we are going to be writing it. I'm just telling you guys that's what's going to happen. So
Good.
Simplify.
yes, simplify. It has different criteria, different processes. To be honest, I recently learned about the exception section of the sign standard. So because I use modifications for everything. And then the other thing, I don't think we're going to get this tonight, and that's okay, because I think Chelsea and I are going to start on crafting the objective criteria portion of this whole conversation, and then we'll start on this other stuff is findings required for approval. We need to revisit them because they're subjective. So we will do that.
Yes.
They are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Strike, strike, strike.
Yep.
strike.
Yep. And just so you guys know, it's like all findings that we have
Yeah.
need to be revisited. So you're not alone in that. So this part, we're not even going to get to this question that I have here. So the plan is for the next meeting in May, Chelsea and I will come with the objective criteria, just the starts of it. I don't know what that'll look like yet. It'll be a nice little surprise for all of us. But we'll have another fun discussion.
Lots of glitter.
Yeah. Like Princess Poppy of the Trolls. I know. Okay.
Glitter flags.
Yeah. Oh, God. Okay. So, Chair, you want to next item?
So let's see, where are we?
Thank you for that.
Yes.
That's-
Yeah,
Yes,
it was
thank you
wonderful.
for all the work that went into that.
yeah.
So, and at this time, there's no action that needs to be taken on any of that. So we are at committee member comments. Any comments from the committee to share this evening?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, city staff comments.
So first, I want to thank you all for your patience with like errors here and there. It was a very rough process coming back from vacation, like getting into it. So we're working on eliminating those. So thank you. And Esther, I know we talked and you wanted a few things, so you can jump in if I don't cover them all.
Sure.
But sorry, I was writing notes all over the place, which is a problem.
Join the crowd.
Okay, so first of all, our community service officer is doing a great job. She has met with the majority of businesses in town. She did talk to the ones that have the feather flags that you mentioned, so they're reaching out to us about permanent signs. While I was on vacation, she had a meeting with a business in town who has a lot of signs, and they worked on scaling it back, and you will be seeing an item at the next meeting for those signs, which we're very excited about. But she's really doing a great job. She works with businesses. She gives 2 warnings and then a citation. I think she's only given out 1 citation, and really works with folks as, if they're working with us, she's a little bit more lenient with them. 2 items. So one, it came up in a meeting a couple months ago about Bangles and Bourbon. They recently repainted their doors. I saw that actually on Instagram. And I forgot to look at the window treatments today. It has not been done yet. Okay, I'll have Jennifer follow
But the
up.
door is done?
The door is done and it's
Okay.
white now. Yes.
You're sure,
Yeah, because I went by last week and it wasn't.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I saw them doing it and I drove by today,
Okay.
but I'll double check.
Keep it open so you can't see it.
Yeah.
being-
No, when I drove by this morning, because it was like
Okay.
7:30, it was
Oh,
closed and it's
sorry.
white. But I'll double check. It's okay. I have to drop
they
my son
could
off
have
and come to work.
painted the metal and gotten that. We're
Okay.
talking about where the paint is coming off.
Oh, yeah.
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 Okay.
The first coat was not applied
Correct,
properly and then it
Okay.
rained, yeah.
I'll double check. I just was so focused on the door that I didn't even think.
okay.
But we'll go by.
Yeah.
And then Craft House, they put up signs.
Yeah.
Jennifer's going to follow up with them this weekend about it. So I think that's it. And then for the next meeting, we have quite a few signs. So a result of Jennifer working more with folks and also thankfully having Lisa here. Lisa is serving point on signs, and so we have a lot of folks coming in asking for signage. So let me pull up my upcoming meetings doc real quick. We'll continue the conversation about the flags. We'll talk about objective design criteria because that's like a separate whole thing, but I don't think it should happen at the same time. But we need to bring that to you all, and we'll talk about why when we get there. We have received inquiries from Radius Real Estate, which is at the corner of Alamo, Pintado, and Mission about signage, the Solvang skate shop. There's a potential re-roof in the TRC. There's a business in town that currently uses temporary signs because they're in like a really terrible location. So we're going to be meeting with them, I think, next week to talk about options. So they may be at the next meeting. Brecky's they're going to propose a menu board as well. Loom Boutique, which is a new business in town, taking over where Giving Inc. used to be. And they're, just so you guys know, they have banners. They will have banners up for like temporary signage. And then Mary Vaughn signs are going to come. She rented a space. And then the other one is Cafe Dolce. So it might potentially be like a very big meeting with signs.
A lot of signs. Could we go back just a second for committee member comments? Just a couple of quick things, because I forgot that I have some notes that people talked to me about. Music in the downtown area, amplified music. I have had 3 people talk to me about, and I can't remember the name of the Mexican food restaurant that's where Succulent used to be. Yeah, Campo del Sol is playing music that's, you can hear it across the street and down a couple buildings.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm coming here with this list of telling on people. So they asked me to talk to you and I said I would. And then one thing I noticed was over at Park Place, there's the house next to it that is nearing completion, and they've done a really nice job. They've added in some wood planter boxes there that seemed out of place. So I talked to Sophia just real briefly about that. I do not believe that they were in any of our plans approved, which is the case over at Viking Motel, which I really, they're looking so much better over there, and the sign looks great. But I would like to have a little follow-up requested as to how it was they ended up with wooden boxes out in front. So it kind of degrades some of the excellent work they did over there.
I'll follow up with them. They did go before committees twice, and I am curious if it's like a ABC requirement for like clear, like this delineation. Thank you, delineation. I struggle.
Yeah.
I've approved a lot of not beautiful.
That we have. Yeah.
Yeah. So I we'll talk more about it. We'll talk more. Yeah.
I think,
I'm concerned about like just pulling folks back in because even though they've gone through it twice.
I do not, that is not my request.
Yes,
Just
okay,
to clarify,
okay.
that is not my request to have them come in. It's
Yes.
just to kind of be aware of, does this need to have the compliance officer maybe have a conversation or not? But my intent is not to bring them back in, to not have you spend the staff time, not us doing.
No, but it is a good point that it's not fair to present, to get approval, and then to do something that's outside of that approval just because, and then put us in the position of having to just eat it. Right?
Yeah.
That's
And
not okay.
I think it's a few things. So one, when they did go through before, I think it was like early 2021. So it was like a weird time. And then I think we could have done a better job of asking for more clarity. That's something I'm wanting to do more. Like now we have more capacity. There's so much work to do that I frequently wait to do analysis when I'm writing staff reports because there's a, I mean, just,
It's overwhelming.
it's overwhelming, the
Yeah.
amount of work.
Yeah.
And so now having Lisa here, I think that'll help start that process earlier to be able to talk to folks about more comprehensive. It happens every once in a while. Like CNE is another example where they got approval and then the next day we saw like window lettering up that we didn't know about. So I'm also trying to think about, is there a better way with like our application process that we're like more comprehensive with asking people more questions? I just need it, there needs to be time to be more thoughtful, I feel like.
You could create a checklist of all of the worst case scenarios, just start keeping that running list and be like, do you have this? Do you have this? Have you thought about, and just use your examples of what you've seen to start your running list of yes, no, maybe so. Because honestly, over my career, that's how I've handled getting that stuff done, right? When you're going to take a new building, like how you think about all those things.
And what you can't do.
Yeah.
We got to, because it's not agendized.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah. I think on that, not to do with any particular agenda item, but we're learning our roles and are better at asking questions and understanding what our responsibilities are as well. So I think, certainly Jennifer and I are now on for the second time around, and same with Pat. And I think we, if we knew back when we started what we knew now, we would be better at asking questions and more aware as well. So, thank you for all your efforts. And
Thank you all so much.
Okay.
I think we make a nice team, so thank you.
does that conclude our meeting? Yeah. Okay, we're adjourned at 8:07.